nĩ ceceni ya Inooro TV.
Ni wega muno nĩ ndwa gũthina mbere gũikarania na ithuĩ gaka nĩ kahinda gatabarĩra yake mũrĩ no mbere gũtwarĩte mũnĩronge wa studio Kenya ngũthomere mohoro maitũ na njĩra nguhĩ ma ithaa rĩrĩ na rĩtwa rĩakwa nĩ Njĩraga wa Gĩthĩnji mũrĩ 11 ũkoragwo ũrĩ wa kũririkana na kũhunjia ũhoro wĩgiĩ ũrigĩrĩria wa mũrimũ wa cukari thĩ yothe gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ. Andũ aingĩ nĩ mahunjagia ndũmĩrĩri ya mũrimũ ũyũ na njĩra itiganĩte, na bamĩrĩ ĩmwe itũũra-inĩ rĩa Sagana Mathĩra kaunti-inĩ ya Nyĩrĩ nĩ merutĩire gũtigĩrĩra ndũmĩrĩri ĩno nĩ yakinya nginyagia icagi-inĩ. Julius Karĩithi wa Mũnene arĩ na ũhoro ũcio makĩria.
Itũũra-inĩ rĩa Inooro Mathĩra kaunti-inĩ ya Nyĩrĩ turacera mũciĩ-inĩ gwa Steven Nderito. Turakora bamĩrĩ ĩno marĩ kĩririkano-inĩ kĩa mwana wao ũrĩa wahurũkire thutha wa kũhotwo nĩ mũrimũ wa cukari.
Ciira arĩ cukuru wetagwo Nyana Hills Academy na nĩ makorirwo maheo mid-term. Nĩ akomete haha nja akĩnjĩra nĩ ararĩo nĩ kĩongo, no nĩ ndarĩ o ndĩmũtware thibitarĩ tondũ ndonete alusi weight na ihenya, na nĩ ararĩte akĩnyua maĩ na nĩ ararĩte agĩthuguma. No ndamũria kana kwĩ handũ hangĩ haratura ugaga ndaraturwo, na tutanakinya gũthiĩ thibitarĩ rĩ agĩtuĩka unconscious. Tũgĩthiĩ tũmũtũmũ kũu nĩ kwathimirwo agĩtuĩka ena diabetic.
Wairimu na mũthuri wake maratwĩra atĩ nĩ marĩ na ihinda iritũ thutha wa ciana ciao ciothe gũthimwo na kuonekanire na mũrimũ wa cukari. Riboti ĩrĩa yamarikirie kĩeha-inĩ kĩnene. Hoto
hatiarĩ o hahũthũ ta hĩndĩ ya Cyrus, tondũ mahinda macio ndawa yonekaga o Nairobi thibitarĩ yetagwo Mathare. Rĩu hĩndĩ ĩyo nĩ twagĩaga na thĩna wa gũthiĩ kũmĩetha na yarĩ na goro. No kwa ihinda rĩrĩ rĩa Julius rĩ insulin rĩu nĩ tuonaga na ihenya tondũ no karatina tuthiaga na nĩ tũrĩ NHIF.
Tondũ kĩrĩa very special harĩo no kũheo starch nini na akaheo vegetable nyingĩ. The other thing no kũmũhe nduhia o harĩ cai ũrĩa manyuaga na kũmuongerera kĩruta mũgate inya na kũmwencourage igo ciothe nĩ ũndũ akona hantarĩ angĩ.
Bamĩrĩ ĩno ndĩakuire ngoro, ĩndĩ monire nĩ kaba mambĩrĩrie kũhunjia ndũmĩrĩri ĩgiĩ mũrimũ wa cukari itũũra-inĩ rĩao. Wairimu agĩtuĩka mũruti wa wĩra wa ũgima wa mwĩrĩ itũũra-inĩ kana CHV, nake mũrũwe Julius akĩambia kũhũthĩra nenda cia ũkinyanĩria kũhunjia ciĩgiĩ mũrimũ wa cukari.
Ndaũingĩrĩte na ngawenda nĩ ũndũ wa wĩrutĩri wakwa kugerera mahinda marĩa ciana ciakwa ciakorirwo ciĩna diabetic kuma Cyrus ũrĩa ũrahurũkire atarĩ ho arĩ na mĩaka 11. Agĩcoka nake Julius nake akĩgĩa ona diabetic, na nginya ona andũ a itũũra rĩrĩ nĩ moĩ nĩ ndĩmateithĩtie ngamathima pressure ngamera ũhoro wa diabetic.
One nĩ ndutaga nyĩmbo, na nyĩmbo ici nĩ njĩra kwarĩria ma youth ngamera ũhoro wa cukari, no korwo he mũyuthi wĩna cukari ndakone taguo mũico wake, afuate o diet yake na afuate ũrĩa ndagĩtarĩ kũnyua ndawa. Na also nĩ njĩkaga TikToks ngĩenda kuonania ũrĩa nyuaga ndawa, diet ĩrĩa ndĩaga, na ndĩna nginya TikTok account @JuliusKhia.
Rĩu bamĩrĩ ĩno maroria andũ matũũra-inĩ maumĩre na mathimwo nĩguo mahote kũramata mũrimũ ũyũ, makiuga tiga kwaga ũmenyo wĩgiĩ mũrimũ wa cukari, mwana wao nĩ angĩahotire kwĩrigita.
Na ona nĩ tũcreataga awareness, na tũthiaga nginya walks, na nĩ thiaga nginya macukuru gũ create awareness kũrĩ students, na bado nĩ thiaga nginya community-inĩ.
Ndagĩtarĩ wa mũrimũ wa cukari thibitarĩ-inĩ mũnene wa Nyĩrĩ Mercy Kĩmondo aroria andũ mathimu mũrimũ wa cukari kuona atĩ ti mũico wa mũndũ kũgĩa mũrimũ ũyũ.
Na ningĩ ona kwĩ rĩngĩ ũkũigua mũciari akiuga mwana wake nĩ anyuaga maĩ mũno, nĩ wega cukari ũrorwo, kana ũgakora rĩmwe ni arathuguma muno mwana ni arathuguma muno especially muthenya kana utuku ni wega kurorwo cukari na ciana ni koragwo na infection nyingi cia githuri kana na njira ya mathugumo ni wega nacio mwana akarorwo cukari nigetha tutikauge tu ati mwana uyu ni akoragwo akirwara kahinda maita maingi
o arahinyĩrĩria arĩa marĩ na mũrimũ ũyũ gũthingata mĩrĩĩre mĩega mĩikarĩre ona ũnyui wa ndawa cia mũrimũ wa cukari. Ngĩribotera Inooro TV, njĩtagwo Julius Karithi wa Munene.
Nega muno Julius Karithi wa Munene nĩ ndwa riboti ĩyo yaku. Riboti yaku nĩyo yatũtirĩra mohoro maitũ na njĩra nguhĩ ma ithaa rĩrĩa thaa ithatũ ũrĩ kuo mohoro mangĩ ta macio kũmamũkĩra na cianda thaa ithano cia rũcinĩ. Gaka nĩ kahinda ga tabarĩra ya Kĩmũrĩ na I can see my brother on the other end, mũndũ gwĩtwo Mike Jenga kana Jenga boy. Kohana tia my brother?
Gũtirĩ kana yo na hanini.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. No kwĩhorerera.
Ndamenya tũrathiĩ tũinĩkĩrĩirie mwaka.
Rĩu tũrathiĩ ũguo tũthiĩte.
Yes.
Na tũgacokeria Ngai ngatho na igua kwanjia kwĩrwo jingle bells rĩ. Ukamenya mwaka ũcio no wathira. Mwaka ũcio rorete gũthira. Na tũgakĩra Ngai nĩ wega tondũ na gũtũmenyera kuma January nginyagia ihinda rĩrĩ. Nĩ kĩama. Kwĩ aingĩ mũno mangĩendete gũkorwo me haha mũthenya ũmũthĩ.
Correct.
No matinakinyeria. Koguo Ngai gũkorwo tuigĩte nginya kahinda gaka rĩ.
Yes.
Nĩ kĩama na tũgathiĩ na mbere na gũcokia ngatho.
Nĩnjũ nĩ mũrarora ũhoro wa ihoto cia ciana na nĩnjũĩ ciana nĩ kĩndũ kĩagĩrĩire kũmenyererwo na njĩra nene mũno. Ciana ikoragwo ci innocent, ciana ikoragwo ci moko-inĩ maitũ, na ithuĩ twĩna wĩigĩrĩrĩki mũnene mũno wa kũrora ciana citũ.
Nĩ iheo tũkoragwo tũhetwo nĩ Ngai.
Yes.
Na Ngai agakorwo atũnengerete mũrigo mũnene mũno. No rĩngĩ ũgakora harĩ o andũ amwe aitũ maremagwo nĩ gũkorwo makĩramata iheo icio.
Thank you.
Tukwarĩrĩria icio.
Thank you kĩharo nĩ gĩaku.
Asante sana na karibu sana mwĩrori witũ rũcinĩ rwa ũmũthĩ thĩinĩ wa tabarĩra ya Kĩmũrĩ nĩ ceceni ya Inooro TV. Nĩ matanya makwa atĩ arĩa hothe mũratwĩrĩra mũrĩ kuma ngongo ciothe ciumaga huho mũrĩ thayũ. Tagwo Michael Jenga witũ mwĩ mũtũ manjĩta Jenga wa Mbũi no mũthenya nĩ njugaga nĩ thayũ. Chabaira, good morning.
Good morning.
Kĩrote.
Nĩ nakao. No thayũ.
Nĩguo twagĩrĩirwo nĩ kũiga.
Mũndũ na nĩ twarũa. Twerekeire kũnina
mwaka no watũrũka.
Agĩa na njathirĩ nĩ tũraugagĩra ũhoro the diaspora. Tũmĩtaga the world new order. Tũmaugagĩra ira ũtukũ tũkaria nao mwaka mwerũ. Ndũĩ rĩu twatigaria wakorwo nĩ taimũrĩ kĩrĩa nĩ kiumia gĩkĩ na kĩu kĩngĩ. Kana kĩrĩa kĩngĩ.
Ciumia ta ithatũ ũguo.
Irĩrĩ twatigaria nĩ ithatũ. Tũgĩthiĩ mwaka mwerũ.
Tũthiĩ ũguo tũtirihĩte.
Na ithuĩ tũrauga nĩ Ebeneza.
Nĩ Ngai.
We nĩwe tũhĩtũkagĩra tũmaũndũ.
Atĩ Ebeneza. Ũguo nĩ kuga hau nginyĩte. Ti hinya wakwa kana ũhoti wakwa.
Kũrĩ tũkaga ũgaikara thĩ ũkarigwo nĩ atĩ ũkwĩra andũ na ũkamahenia ũgecimairia. Ũkehe hinya.
Rĩngĩ tũkehe hinya thĩinĩ wa Mwathani tondũ kwĩ mũthuri ũranjũria ndĩna ngeithi ciaku nyingĩ mũno kuma kũrĩ njiarwa cia gĩceha. Tũramitĩte nacio ciothe tũragĩa na mahinda mega mũno na mũthuri ũgwĩtwo Mũkũmũ na nyina wa Cuka maranjĩra ngũgeithie mũno. Matiuma hau maranjĩire nginya tũrĩrĩkia matingĩehera.
Nĩ ũndũ mwega na tũrakĩrahĩra ũmenye no mwaka ũyũ tũikarire thĩ na president deputy na ngakũ ndikũ cia kwĩna mũndũ tũngĩtaga gũka. Nĩ mwaka mwega.
Nĩ Ngai.
Wagĩjwo nĩ Wakabura Joseph endagia barĩa the Sun.
Okay.
Ũguo Thursday tũgathiĩ harĩa Juja High Point. Tũkĩria indo ciake.
Wakabura Joseph
akĩnjĩra wĩre Jenga atĩrĩrĩ ngoima nĩ nyingĩ.
Harĩria indo tũgoka.
Rĩu hau rĩ akĩnjĩra na njigue ũkiuga. Ũguo nĩkĩo ndagĩathĩka. Athesalonika wa mbere 5:21-22. Athesalonika wa mbere 5:21-22. Roranagiai maũndũ mothe. Rũmagiai maũndũ marĩa mega. Themagai ũndũ o wothe mũũru.
Themagai.
mukarorania maundu mothe ikurorania ni kunyabara maundu mothe urumagiai maundu maria mega kurumia maria mega themagai undu o wothe muru taru mundu agikureherera ngoiri ndu ni ngui aranyita matu kugo no bati ugithoria mundu ri wiharirie nawe uhoro wa kunyita ngui ki
matu.
Daktari Susan Getao, karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Ureho. Ona no ingera thini wa buku ya andu aria ngakoto eta mwaka wa 2023. Karibu sana.
Kego ndite haha.
Kimure ti uhoro wa ithero. Twaikara na thuri ere kaho. Na baitho toga ni athuri. Ithe wa nake. Ndio gatokeraga ndogu.
Nema. Nyondo wa undu fulani.
Karibu sana daktari.
Asante sana.
Viatu.
Mirori we mwega rucini rwo mute ni twoka no getha tukihote gukindirithia ndereti ino ya ihoto cia ciana citu o tukiroraga maundu mangi tuteithia kuhota gukorwo tukirera ciana citu na njira iria igwete na thina mbere gucokeria afkik ngatho cia mwanya muno ni undu wa gutunyitirira makiria muno kuria Kiandutu kia Njau Primary School na ndimwire na inyu andu a Kiandutu mutigathukagie maundu maria memega kuma tuingire ku muthiite mugabunja mukaiya ku aria magithiite makaiya tinyu inyuothe na ni ndamwirire hiria twekiraga riko ku ni mumenyaga riko ria iyu thufuria ya iyu kuri twaragwo mumenye ciana icio cingikura wega aiko ni mundoraga mugakena nacio ni ikahana tani kana ona ituike njega gukira tani koguo ni tutige guthukia njokerie ngatho Bethsaida membukira wa reri ni undu wa seminar ria mwinayo very wonderful seminar wiki ino yothe ona korwo ciana iria twina ciume ni ciukite mwena ucio no guteithania turateithania ni tondu ni rigwa kwanyu kwina chapu muno na nyama no wiki ino ngima ni turakena muno tondu ona aria magitigitwo ni marakiria makahuna na njire andu athika muthio na mbere gututeithia na mungiremo ni guthi ku drop uteithio wanyu haria section 9 aria moi kanini harakatu yo opposite Hawimara Plaza third floor turehere ibosho turehere ibebe turehere ushuru nigenete muno ni undu wa kimuri ni tondu mwage kumenya uria mwikite no ni ndiri ndakona program ndirahota gufidi ciana ati wiki icio ciothe riu ikoretwo ihanikite koguo na ria twari haha itwagire na andu marakihota gutunyita guoko na maundu magathi matwikite mega koguo ni no kumurikithia mathina maria twina mu bururi-ini na njira iria yagirire koguo ni ndimuhote nginya ni wendo na njira ya magegania tonjugaga mundu othe uhutagia mwana muthini ahutagia ngoro ya Ngai na kwa Ngai gutiri muthini tondu Ngai ti gukomberwo akombagirwo na andu makiuga ni gukomberwo no ni endaga gututhima wendo witu kinyite ha na uigiririku witu na wihokeku ukinyite ha koguo Royal Media Services Ngai arothi na mbere kumuteithia ni gwika uria kwagirire.
Asante sana. Wakiri Fauri na Ngendo, karibu sana.
Asante.
Niko haka hivi tukale kwa witu jenga ndaigua kama itu akigeta Fauri na Fauri ni kitu kile muciari so wakiri Pauline karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Ureho
Ndiriokwa
geithia
ni ndakugeithia mwiroreri na wa mbere nyambe njokeria Ngai ngatho ni njwito kawaida gukiroko haha Kimuri ni favor ya Ngai na njuge o toguo nderitwo iga nima mwaka uyu ngirora uria wathie ni ndiraririkana January tukirugia mwaka hutha ici ndirarora mwaka ni uthirire koria haya
tuga koinama mwaka wa inama
ni wa inama
tukirie kurugio nge
tukirie kurugio
2024 no gatobe kuririkania 2024
ni
ni Ngai
koguo tuge nima ni Ebeneza na ni thengio muno na kuri Royal Media Services na kuri inywe ni gukinjita ni tugakehe andu horo wa mawatho tukinoraga andu uria kwagirire na ni thengio muno
karibu njeka tukiambiriria ri heki uria ndakorwo ngitonya haha ndu ndimo furafuriki no ikufurafurika furafurika ne guthie muhahe uguo undu tumaundu-ini ora utorio ne kande mwaterebe kathi uria wakiria tirere kwanja kiuma giake muno ate rika rianyu na aria nini ati ni marakora anake ajenga awaihura na aria kama ni ri ni rombe gudirenda ni ngwirera mwana acoka kongerera gikuyu ati mbegu ati ndikagwo ati
ndimanago
riu ndoria atiriri now so never to call the responsible itondo kana augo guo jengari rehe bandiko itangendo agandika
atwe no mwana arenda
ni sawa riu ri hau aroiga ati no urariria rika riaku riu ni anake ni the boys clubs are asking ati na kuri mekorete hatikaini yo mabati kweheria ati
ati maretio mbegu
mwiritu akamwona tu nie no mwana no maundu maku ndi kwenda na hanini
na ti mwana kiorera mwiritu
ndiranyita uria uraiga
muno
ni kindu na tutaranyita
nyita tondu ucio ni wama
nyitire uhoro muno
ni mahinda ndarate
ni mahinda ndarate
aya riu kicho na bakwirora
ndito ne nyitire ni muiritu wakora mwanake kana muthuri handu agakora boy child tukimetaga boy child ni girl child irakora boy child handu the endangered species ikamwira nie ndi sawa nikiria ndirenda noki tutumetaga spam donor riu we kungikinya ni hau number 1 turia atiriri woni wakwa ni atiriri number 1 is a trap mutego
nikiana
mutego tondu wariri mwana uyu anokai haria karemererwo ukamwira ni twandikanire will this agreement abdicate your parental responsibility until mwana ucio akinya 18 years
wenda kura boy child yata ni akurera mwana ucio 18 years
until 18 years itiwe fafa wa mwana agreement ni ko waiva tetiwe fafa wa mwana
akire mundu athieta kuhereria mukoko
asa wa ingira hoi utonye we wothe ukimenyaga wa ingira gitama
mundu mugima
ni mundu mugima
we no mwana arenda sawa
utire na thina no wathougite atiriri baba wa mwanae na mamu wa mwanae mena responsibility iguru ria mwana uyu nginya gakinya miaka 18 kuria mwagirire mwana kuria mweranaga kana ni mbego wetagio kana ndwetagio uria gwathire the end product mwana uyu haha ithe tiguo mwana githe ndoka ru uthie kugate acanjirire mwana ni akorera
egucoka guthite
ndakwira atiriri wathito igoti-ini uguthie kuga twari na agreement na igire mwana ni akwirerera
yakorwo ena agreement ati uguora uga
na DNA ndagwitithia
na witness
utire na thina you want to tell me this agreement is going to abdicate your parental responsibility
okay let's ekatukiherere hau ekatukiheria subject daily to jega kamau athie aheo kuria spam ya etugo athie aheo igutire na spam banks nicio iciekuo
IVF
kagure
ni agathie guthita the unknown father
gwicire kuringana na kuuria guthiaga ni ati he obviously ugithie thiguti aria mekagwo maundu macio ma IVF andu aria matahotaga kugia mwana kawaida makaheyo fertility na kina andu icio gwiciria facilities icio makoragwo nacio kana kuria makoragwo ni makoragwo na mitaratara yao na agreement irio sainaga tondu nona riu hauti mundu wathie wakora personally no ingigaikara thi ngwikira ithabu nyone ati na ni for example nyone ati ni ndirenda mwana waku ni ithabu riu rikugukorwo njikite
toko ni mauthi toko ni ikere toko ni icoka
tiguo ndiriga atiriri thigutire na ithabu rikitwo ngoria atiriri haya reke ngorie kiuria giki aria matari kindu tukiuge garagaria for example kwi mundu aguthie garagaria ni ndirenda mwana ni muni kwi mundu uthie amwire ni ndirenda renda mwana waku tarora kiuria riri tarora mundu uria wiragwo we tarora mundu ucio akoragwo na qualities iriku na characteristics iriku
tokoro ni kiu kirake
ko ndarithie ere mundu o wothe
nikio ndire no twabe turori atiriri no uyu wiragwo
toko ni kuguciririo ni uria arona mundu ucio etumibango twega etumitaratara
acha tudore ni ameragwo twarie ma ni ameragwo ni ndirenda mwana waku
na ciro cio wathi igoti
ni uguthie gwe shamba boy
boy shall ndangihotana
ni uguthie gwe shamba boy umwira ni ndirenda mwana waku ni ngurera
aterere no me hapa sana akedo mo na wene uri to mwana
hapa sana
tutirari horo subject ya tia cio gare cia na cito
no roraria ni horo wa ma taru my son hindi aragiturite UK ri mwana no imundu cia Nigeria ni nene muno mwiri onake no munene riu meragwo mundu etikira aheo milioni imwe aya ne mbegu ini na muthungu tondu ina mbeca tondu ringi andu aya ndungimenya oguo arauga ri no ratangetu no umenye the minute wona weka uguo maundu maya mangi andu makoragwo mari atumumu mundu no akugaruruke anytime otoria twiragwo horo wa surrogate mothers mutari na any legal contract no ugarurukwo anytime ni mundu na ngwiciria niho arageria kuhinyiriria werwo niki arafu kurio maundu mangi ni nyendaga kuga tondu waihura andu ani tucemanitie nao ni wa mawira-ini maitu ni ati ungi nituge wewe mwanake munini no wakorwo ni mutumia thani ndakwira ni no mbegu yaku ndirenda hihi ni uratara muturire waku hau kabere tondu undu wa ma gutiri hindi maikabutika karora cucu uria hitukite uguo na mwana njiro kamenya ni weithe wa mwana uria ni ukahota guikara na maundu mau thini wa muturire waku
consequences
undu uri ungi tondu ni njemanitie nginya na anake marenda kwihatura handu hau ona amwe ona ti ciana icio makageria ikaga kuingira no ugatuika no anaso tondu hekirio hea ni ukahota kuma ruwe mo mafocagwo guthama ko ikaraga Nairobi ugathama gathi guikara Mombasa kana Kisumu kana ugetha wira Qatar kana Dubai tondu mutumia uyu nake uragukora ri ni arenda mwana uyu eci ni mundu muhuru eci ugukorwo ni tuitu tunini mundu ina mbeca niki agwika ona ewe mwanake oko ni athuri reke ngwe ona athuri mari oho ona athuri tainyu mari oho no rwa athuri tainyu mari oho ri hau ona ndiika ni makinyaga kuria kwarigo no ni njui kuria andu maugaga mama ni ahenirie tondu ni anjirite no mwana arenda endaga uria thekaga endaga uria cikaraga no kuma hau no gathimu mwana aciarwo we umenye na waga gwika ati njire mutumia waku amenye turi aya
blackmail
exactly rukogo ni wega andu agima
andu magia na consensus
exactly ona riri tiga consensus tondu ni magiaga amwe magagikorwo matina korwo ni ndeto eno no mundu ni amenyaga uma ni ndi mwana handu uma ndukabutika na mwana uyu waku no akinye handu ende gukumenya ni ugetikira umenyo ni mwana ucio waku na undu uria wiho ni atiriri andu na mangitura mauga ni kuhitha andu ni moyo horo hau tugikorwo tuthia nawe kaingi handu jenga tugakoragwo hingo ciothe haria jenga ari na waihura wabuyeha hau na andu ni moiri ndiri muthuri mone ni ndeka ati umenye uria guthie undu wa mbere ni handirona wa mbui muno reke mambie kuona Inooro riana riaku onogeria kwihitha twi hamwe koguo ru nie njuragia ugigetikira maundu mamwe ri ni wihariirie maundu maria maumirira ma ndeto eno yaku
gwikora
gwikora na andu no mekoraga na ni twariririe uhoro wa gwikora wewe kora ni njugaga undu wothe wi mundu mugima wekora pambana naguo riu andu aingi ni iguoya na guthirete ni ari angi kana ona wa mwira riu menye ndi hakuhi gwika ati koguo mwana uturarira nayo kamwira ruta ukimutumagira mbeca na kuri makwiraga tuma mbeca batuma 50 batuma cigana ni remire kumeno ndi niki no gutie andu arathi kuruta nginya ndeo koguo ri ni njuga rumeri arume murare ingi ai ati gutiri hindi mako mari ingi mwana no nginya ko ni mundu uyu
omwe
mbegu no nginya ikorwo ni imwe yathii handa haria koguo no akaumirira na hau niho twamwiraga atiriri nginya last time mutigike DNA nigetha mu verify mwana ni wa
no DNA kagwo mwana aciarwo
ka mwana aciarwo kegugikwo mbere ka mwana aciarwo na ti mbeca nyingi ungithi guku gwa thirikari 10,000 to 20 andu ha uturi uria mbeca nyingi
Boy, I'm well up, and I went for a shamba boy just for the seed.
You see?
Yeah, na wangi muno ha makaria no ni gwenda turore kasira gaka ka kuhuranira mwana gucanio cia mwana ni tukurora the mental aspect of it riria mwana uyu arathi haha no nyende kumenya muno haha riria turitana igotini ni kurikana ni tworagia kiume kiu kiriga undu wa affidavit of means na maundu maria mangi no gakora riria kaingi tumenyerete mutumia agithi gotini kuga ndarateithirio mwana tareke tuke haha riri muthuri urathi gotini ni imetwo custody ni imetwo nginya kuona mwana thimu nditioyagwo mwana amuonagira handu petrol station ini amucuthireirio uguo agacoka agathie kaingi twiciragia atumia no mageragira gacira gaka nake muthuri ageirwo ni gwika atia uyu ni aramenya u ni mwana wakwa no mutumia uyu arahuthira mwana u ta kivoko ya go punish muthuri uyu haha te wakiri muthuri ageirwo ni gwika atia
uringiuga atiriri kuringana na watho baba wa mwana the father onake bado ariona ke ariona right ya ku access mwana uyu kindu kiria kimakagia no horo tondu ni njikaga mashira maingi ma children na ma family ni atiriri hingo ciothe baba wa mwana na mamu wa mwana makigucania no mundu ena bitterness ciake kana uria gwathire kana korwo ni mwahikite mugitigana kana korwo ni muhe uria wekorire o uria gwathire riria mwina ngui mwana uyu niwe usafaga tondu rimwe kiria nyonaga na kindu kiria kimakagia ni ati aciari ni meriganagirwo rumaga bare ria menayo makaingiria ciana gatagati na ucio ndukoragwo ndu mwega ni njiraga andu atirire angikorwo we inyue ni nyumwe na bara rwani cianyu no mutige kuingiria ciana mwambe mweherie riri bare ria mwinayo mukorwo mwe objective uhoro wa ciana ici riu nikio wonaga atiriri ringi tokorwo na muthuri ucio rureke twari uhoro wa thuri tondu atumia ni tukiaragia muno tuge muthuri ucio na tokorwo ndarare na kindu no kiundu giokire gigithie gigikora na tuge na tokorwo ni ara providaga nona no ni kwatiga handu ni matigana ugakora mutumia ni undu wa ruo ruria na ruo nona akahinga kiria kiu nona na kwe ringi ni justified ni undu wa domestic abuse and violence no kwe angi bado ti justified no ciana tucirahuthirwo ni undu wake kuhana tari go punish muthuri uyu tu wewe ta baba wa ciana icio ngikora hau ni kumenya matamenyaga no ni ndira appreciate ati thiku ici ona kwe aria mareyumiria na makaiga atiriri asa ni gwathire no ni ndirenda heo access ya kuonaga mwana wakwa na hote go provide mwana wakwa kwe athuri mareyumiria ni kumenya matamenyaga onawe wita baba wa mwana to muhaka no mutumia gutitangire onawe wita baba wa mwana no thitange mutumia ucio children's court na uge we ndurahota kuona ciana ciaku na ni urenda igoti rikuhe access ya ciana ici na okorwo ni school fees uge ni urenda kuriha school fees na mungikorwo mutire in talking terms na mamu wa ciana ici uri advisor ga thuri ni atiriri riha school fees direct cukuru ti beno thiore ha school fees direct tuma slipio no korwo wike na WhatsApp kana onaki no we thiore ha school fees direct agikorwo mutire naki na communication yo na mutira hota go parent uria kwagirire tondu rimwe mundu igatire aca ona ni gwathire ya gwathire nawe ugakira nona no wakira ciana mwana uyu na mwana uyu ndari na hatia na mwana uyu tiwe watuma inyue mwahitania maundu manyu niki gigutuma mwana uyu atuike niwe agusafa consequences cianyu inyueri
no atumia ne marahuthira mwana muno go punish go punish mundu uyu
go punish the father
ya mwana uyu wakora ona ndari ha thukuru access gaimo access do hata ko access ati mwana uyu akure akuwe mwana uyu mukure mukimenyanaga onogoro ni a weekend mwana uyu mukure mugakoro mwinake weekend iyo punishment itaina kureire wakiri then riria tuoka na tondu ni ugika mediation riria tuoka na twerana nä ndä rä haga thukuru nä ndä gå raga kä na nä ndä kagona no nawe rä å njä tä kagä rie nyonage mwana rä rä a hakinya no kå rä ha ndärarä ha no ndiretä kä rio kuona mwana rä hau naho atä
å thiaga igoti-inä å ka make application å kaiga atä rä rä å ga provide evidence yaku niä nä ndä rarä ha school fees nä ndä ra provide responsibility yakwa ndä ta baba wa mwana å yå no nä ndä ragirio access rä u igoti nä rä kå heaga access no rä u atä rä rä angä korwo mwana å yå athomaga kuma rä nginya rä holiday ciahingwo å gagä ikara na mwana å yå wiki ciganona kana weekend okorwo mutirenda kuonana kana okorwo mutirenda mucemanie ku nyumba there are people ciana irehagwo official family ciana ikoyo the nearest shopping center kana the nearest place to kuria mwana araikara koguo arrangement icio ni cimekagwo na we wita baba wa mwana wina ni hari andu matamenyaga but wina right ya kuona mwana waku
yagikorwo sorry tonoka kuri yagikorwo riri na mwatigana na gututariria gukaga atia wendo ugacenjanio na mbara ndo hito muracigia mwana reje ngari hakira ndo ukati ugacenjio mbara no riri haha ri ndiraigua to rahinyiriria boy child yo nawe assume ni mwagitigana na mundu no kuri arenda uthomithirie mwana je ngari ni takio no hu itondo na mwana ucio no twarwo cukuru ya muingi okay 2 yagikorwo nake mutumia uyu ni anira na mundu rume ungi nake adopt ciana ici ningi ne batie gwithingiriria guthie guthomithia ciana ici
one thing ni kuri the biological parent kana guthie atia kana guthie atia we wita baba wa mwana ucio ni ugutwara with the biological father na nyingi ona adoption igikwo gikorwo ni athire nake hikae he kindu gitagwo consent we wita biological father kana ni ugwitikira so onokorwo na fafogi hau na magia mwana ungi
wamegate
wamegate kana uri agiuka ucio ungi we wita baba wa mwana ucio uri ona right ya ku access mwana ucio tondu ni waku
agikondereda
agikondereda ukigwa riu ni woya moko iguru na matwarane na ucio wake muoya bado ni guthiaga uguo tondu mau ni maundu mara happen society-ini tha ici uririkani atiriri ni ndirahinyiriria boy child na ni nyendaga ku advocate ona boy child o ria advocate agira atumia and girls no kwaria uria maundu mari tha ici the boy child ni akuanitie maundu maingi muno yeah we did a lot of affirmative action for the women tukiriganirwo mutumia otwa mwe power akinya haha nake boy child amukore haha kumuhura ri guguthia atia koguo we must also now empower the boy child na turore boy child muto athuri ni mahinyikireire muno maundu maria ngoranaga namo ni maingi muno
kana matigane na inyu
meke atia
mare
magokinya gwikara mari
gwikorwo gikino gitango andu meikarie
meke atia
ndikwenda
wiki atia na no ame andoro na matahotaga kwikaria mari iki ni athuri ni boy child
ndo kone arume
ni arume mutumia agikara ungienda kumenya mutumia ni ikaraga nje ngari ni hinya one muthuri mangitigana na mutumia wake aikare atari na mundu ungi no mutumia no aikare na ikare ginya na ciana ciake na ikare ginya agakua na agaikara muturire mwega no inyui umeye kindu kia mbere ginya ni gutega tongoria kona mundu ni atera ni gatongoria ni gitarani ya na ndimenyaga ni atia guthia gwiciria ri turika kiria research tumenye no mutumia ni agwikara na ikare mukenu na ikare wega even biblically ungirora ginya uhoro wa Naomi na Ruth you can see ginya maundu makagirira kanona atumia aria muya ndigwa riu ta mwana twitaga haha jenga na tumetaga aria mutongoragia ikundi cia atumia ndigwa na warwa mutumia ucio ndari kindu agite ni mukenu ati ono ngegira gwetherera ati ti mukenu ni mukenu no mundurume ni hinya na nikio ingienda na ni kunyita mbaru uria arauga turore uhoro wa boy child na turore uhoro wa athuri ndirare kanitha ungi haria Thika Destiny International Ministry ndirona twaria muno uhoro wa watho uhoro wa ihoto cia mutumia ndirakira ndirera pastor na ni thengi muno pastor Mary Matheka wa Destiny International Church ndiramwira riu hindi ingi ni ukunjita kanitha uyu waku njitira athuri tondu hindi ingi njira ukona ha kiamba gikara na athuri over 300 athuri kanitha wa ACK twaria nao ni maugire wabui watwira maundu tutari twerwo na ngiona athuri ni kwaga magaga handu ha kwaraniria na ni makinyirikaga muno we ta we uria atiriri tondu ciana igiri ni cia ciero haha kahii na kairituri niki gitumaga kana ga kahii ucio muthuri akue mbere ya mutumia niki ningi korwo ndina mathina ndina muri turugame turiri haha mwanake na wambui ni ngae no uguteithio naruo ni koguo ni he gukinya handu itwikana ningi mugukira mukorwo mwitoro mukire nugetha muteithanie tondu gutiri muci nie njui na nderiria athuri acio ngimera muci utari muthuri ni uhuthagio muno na muci utari muthuri uraria akaiguika ti maundu maingi mathiaga koguo ni ndameraga muri afata muno no ni ndikio inyue kana he undu mungikota kwambiriria guteithania ta athuri tondu taru riria muthuri onu ena thina tocio guthi gucemaga uguo eroragire ciana ciake haraihu kana agatumaga neighbor na ndui kana indo ciaku icio iratuma irorera ki gatagati no ha ni hotukaga thini wa judiciary tukamera atiriri mundu ucio uranegenania nawe petrol station na supermarket ati ni wonire ciana wathi gucitigeithia ri ni ucigurire mithuguiti gateo nja na nyama na nguori mundu ucio waihura ni murwaru koguo ni turamera o hakigiaga justice hagie no horo wa mental health services tondu mundu muhonu tondu tukiri okwe tukiri am very cordial ni ni njui aratakwa ni matiganire na ndirakwira ciana ciao ciagio ko ni thina wa cukuru wake othe macemanagia haha ona ndungimenya na andu acio ngimera kindu mweka kia bata ni mwana ucio utoi niki mwekanire na ciana kwanza ici ci miaka 10 gucoka thi moi baba ni mwega moi mami ni mwega no uruire wona ongerwa uguthe muciari uyu ungi riu hau niho ciana igia guoya ikauga hapana dadi aende alichapa mam ama mami mami ni mbaya tondu ciana ciaragia ma no ni no nyende kwira mutumia uri uragiria muthuri wake kuona ciana ciake we ni urahitia muno na ni ciana ciaku urekira maroruha na ironda na irema igakorwo cihinya muno kuhonia aikorwo muthuri waku ti ugwati gwi ciana ciaku ti mundu ungicihura ti mundu ungiciika uru ti mundu ungiciananga reke baba wao one ciana no menyo no ngihika kungi kana ugie na mundu rume ungi uroka gwaku mwana uyu ona nene hariria akamenya ithe ni agagukua na njira nditu muno na kumwe ni ukaremwo ni kwirisha koguo ni ngwira atumia othe handu mwaruma tiga ithe wa mwana age kwenda mwana auge ndari na bata nake na no wega no ngumuhoya muiganire to kuri athuri makihana uguo matiendaga kumenya ciana cia iria maciarire matiendaga kumenya uria ciikaga no sawa na ciana icio no ndicihoere Ngai aciteithie muno na kanitha yukirie athuri maritaraga ciana ici iria itari na maithe tondu ugwati ni ati mwana wothe utari na ithe na waihura ngukwira uguo ndi mbere ya Ngai mwana kwanja wa kahii ni agia na mathina maingi
no mohago
ndirakwira mwana wa kahii ona tiko muno na drugs ginya kwaga kindu gitagwo self confidence rimwe ni yagaga
self esteem
kana gutua matua endia kuria muthuri ritwa riake ni guthura ndenda nguoni horo no na gutua matua decision making ciana cia kahii cia single mothers kaingi matangigia na good mentors ni makona gathina ga ku decide muturire especially life decisions na ndungigithingiriria mundu there is a problem tondu ithe wa mundu ingira muciguaga atia ndamwira inyuothe thaa ithano mukorwo mukomete nima ndamwira uguo thaa ici mukorwo mwikite ndenda urore na atumia rimwe ni manegenaga makauga hu aguthukire no kamugambo kau ke kaundu tariu he mwanake mwaranjirie nie nguthi na mbere na guthoma kuria ndetirwo ni undu wa my dad na ndarora ndirona ndari na uru aranjira nguthi na mbere tondu my father aranjiririe atiriri wira uria wina guo munene we waihura ni guthoma ucio ni wira ara nguhete thaa ici na ni wira uria munene ndina guo thaa ici ni gwetha mbeca uthome kamwana kau karanjirire ona thukuru yo gikorwo ihana atia ni undu wa baba na ciugo icio ithuĩ tugaga
wira uria tutwagaya na wira we uthome na facilitate
exactly no tai ko mutumia mugi wabirie gwika uguo na tiraithi tondu ni experience yo guthomithia wabirie kwaria ta muthuri ciana icio kaingi ni ciuraga cia kahi tathio makore ingi kamiti thio makore ingi kuria kwina mathina mau ma kuhenio nona mau ma kuhenio kana haha kana rora namba nene kungi kuu ni ukurora muthuri ndekinyite muno thini wa mucicio tondu ciugo cia muthuri na ni ngai
tugagikindirio
ai exactly koguo ni ngwenda njuge gwiciria ni ihinda rikinyite twicirire akiri ni nguroraga haria urari uhoro wa mbegu na thina uyu wikuo bururi
kura ndo moka korewe andu mahota gwiciria twina njenga matoho turehira
ni horo
kuri maroka kuri methino agithina
du ati hatiri mu watwira hau ire shamba boy ringi arorire akiona shamba boy ena ma exactly akiona riu ri ndiratinda njethete mbegu no imenya ni ngai watwendire muno njenga agitweherania na nyamu agituhe gatongoria no ivi na nyamu tiganiria
no twejenjere haha
urenda njugia
shamba boy uyu ri njenga hau ri ni shamba boy egwake
niyo no endie kana ni
niguo andika auga atiriri let me look for it auga we oire shamba boy amwela niguo arauga I just took a shamba boy ni undu wa mbegu.
Is there a possibility that shamba boy uyu ri akoragwo ku gwake niwe urengaga ngiri akorwo ithenya ria muthuri akiona maundu mara hi muthuri abati ukorwo ageka ni mo shamba boy areka
ini
kana hi ndareka
ringi muthuri ni murebi undu ungi nyonaga muriganagirwo ri ona thuri ni magaga mbegu ici ni moyo ugu niguo ingiaga biu na muture hau mwikaga ate muteremaga guthiaga ate gutiri undu ukona na nikio njugaga andu mambe metikire wona ni moikara mwaka mugima na mutuire hamwe kumba muhikani
no ndakihuthia muthuri ucio kana njira nene wona
riu no wona we ni urathukiriria na tokoro muthuri ona no mwirite riu we no getha haifu ici thire twifa twifa
ate ndakuhe
na muthuri mothe ndakuhe hinya na wathani ari mugi muno ari mugi muno nitire ni kwathire ari mugi muno tondu turathi kuri IVF ni pesa ciga
very expensive
ugathi ya mbere gabiro ya keri ukendia nginya mugunda ukindirauga maundu ma advocate no mugiku ndiroria atiriri tondu ni orire ri apambane na hali yake ni no gujuga
katwigire na ni jone tugutiriha tuguikiria ratha kaida gatari kunene right ya kumenya your parent hani dona mudo auga mimi sijui buda na mam hataki kunisho nifanyaje usio gakauga good morning it's like mimi nilijua my father last year and it's difficult kumuitikia because for 18 years amekuwa away gakauga good morning I'm 22 years now I've been looking for my father asking my mom every time I ask her she cries so much we end up not talking about that story please help right ya mwana kumenya ithe kana nyina whichever way no in this case kaige father no wira
ni mababa manio matamenyekana
baba no twikani akinyirwo ni kirori ngogethire athire Burundi ndari acoka
uringiuga ni atiriri wa mbere katiba itu Constitution of Kenya ni koragwo na article ya right to information mundu othe akoragwo na right ya kumenya information iria irapatini mwe mwenyewe koguo mwana uyu yes ena right ya kumenya baba wao no ruthi na haria ukagira mami niwe oi baba wa mundu uyu ni uriku koguo mamu wao no angimwira unless akorirwo na njira ciake ahote gufuatirira nginya amenye baba wao no mwana ena right ya kumenya baba wao no uria guthiaga uria uramenya baba wao angikora hena kaundu gathirio guguo na magetigana mwana uyu ari munyinyi nona ni mamu wao koguo no mamu wao angimwira na ni wona tocio urorio akarira koguo ni kumanisha atiriri hena trauma na mutumia uyu ndahirite nona na niki atangimwira baba wao no koguo ni kuringanaga uria gwathire niguo mwana uyu ayuka tucoke turirikane atiriri kwi aria magiaga ciana through rape and defilement and God forbid no nona ni agia mwana ru mundu yake uria atiriri mwana uyu ngumwira ni product ya rape kana defilement aturage na kiundu kiu thiini wake kana ngire amenyage twathini gwathire uria gwathire koguo ni kuringanaga mwana uyu agirirwo in which circumstances ikirona kwa mahithaga na mahithaga fio na magakua nayo makaigani uguo magathii nayo to the grave koguo nĩ kũringanaga circumstance ĩrĩa mwana ũyũ agĩrĩirwo nĩ ramata.
Very unfair.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate.
Following our divorce in the wake of COVID-19, I live with our 3 children. I have recently begun dating, and my 16-year-old daughter has formed a close bond with my fiancé. However, this has led to my ex-wife verbally abusing her upon seeing their photos together. I had to subject my daughter to counseling. Nĩ muthuri nĩ matigana na mutumia na atigwo na ciana thutha wa kahinda kaigana ona rĩ nĩ agĩa mũndũ fiancé nake fiancé ũyũ rĩ nĩ matuĩka mũirĩtu nĩ mutumia kana mutumia nĩ matuĩka close mũno na kairĩtu gaka nyina wa kairĩtu gaka ona mbica araruma kairĩtu gaka agĩkabĩraga matu nginya gatwarĩtwo rũ counseling.
Ni riu ri muthuri uyu ni ndona ni mugi na ni ndirenda athuri aingi mone uguo tacio turaririria mena mathira na matigirwo ciana njira njega ni counseling na ni ndirakena muno ni athuri aria marehaga ciana ciao na makiria muno cia iritu counseling ni marangenia muno tondu mutumia uyu wake nona custody ya hiwo muthuri niguo neona no raikara na ciana na ni agia murata nake ni mutumia mugi no ni mutumia mugi akora ciana cia muthuri uyu to ni aciendete ni amwendete akienda nginya ciana magituika close no ni ngumera atiriri mecirie nyina wa ciana onake tondu horo wa guikia nginya mbica ici mitandao-ini ni ningi no kumuiguithia uru to kuri andu amwe nao mahakanaga ikwenda kuga ni uyu watwandikira kuri mahakanaga ukaumuka imana kuhota gukinyira ciana ciaku nginya wai mutumia ndirari uguo to kuri makesi ona ni njui ukona mani watunyo ciana tondu mundu we na indo na ari angi aikonenda gutunya ciana biu uriheago tutawa twa guthukio mutwe ukahora ringi ukandikirwo akiria ukandikirwo irua report ya psychiatry riu ingikimune ciana tia kwate na data
ugatunyoke ho
yateire gataoithe exactly ona unyina maitagura maundu meri both ways no na uyu ndari giciuraga koguo nini ndirauga ndiyo undu wathire ku umundu ndi wathire ku koguo ni ngwenda kuga atumia mumenyerere guti athuri anyu tondu he angi makova metereire na kuri moi gukirera ciana by the way ningi ni kwaga maciagite koguo turure miciitu
magithio na rere Jeka OCPD muthoni haria Juja
Santi muthoni
na akiuga ati riu maundu mamakoraga na akiuga ati is a timely discussion yo kana rete tuikirie kana njurie kimwe
oria kimwe hwakaire tuikirie
hena riri andu ametagwo step father na mwakimenana kana ni gwathi uria gwathi no riu no akiona mwani akungi kimundurume kiki kwa muhiano no riu agakorwo nake ciana ici nake ataciarite akorwo agicia abuse kana guci mistreat no etondu wa wendo waku na kimundu gikiri gwitagwo ni wendo wa urimu uka trade off na ciana ciaku hau atia right ya ciana icio atia
Ore ngiuga wa mbere ni atiriri angikorwo wina ciana na you are remarrying kana getting into a relationship wa mbere ni wagirirwo kurora mundu uyu we uraiga ni muraingira kiwendo giki nake ahwana atia
and both ways either
both ways mutumia ndiko citurarora both ways the man or the woman number 1 ni mundu functional
neke
functional we are having to na do dysfunctional then she in this society nikasana na gutwira dysfunctional yes they na thuti yes ni ndirathi wira ni ndireka mundu no haha things are not coordinating nice dysfunctional
libido
asha libido we ndugecirio guo I mean dysfunctional mentally mesiria ti mundu functional
mundu ndaruta wira
ti mundu soba heka undu gutara coordinate wega mesiria-ini make na mbere twakire turirikane andu mena so many mental disorders wagatatu andu mena kindu gitagwo depression na mena functional depression mundu thiini ni depressed no ni aguthie na arute wira
no athi kawaida
na akuruta wira wega muno no acokerera na haria ewika hatire mundu
nirahiguka
ti ndagicokia kana akaigwe maundu twitaga relapse
neke
uri kasara how relapse yani ala function from there's a thin line between sanity and insanity
kuri hindi aguruka
kuri hindi akoragwo no mwana kuri akiraga mwena uyu ungi uguo twambe twimenyerere number 1 wambe urore no ucio urarehera ciana ciaku kuguo ni njiraga andu nduka introduce mundu oro uguo wamba ukarora no ura introduce ra ciana ici
history utanatonya kihiko-ini giki we kana relationship ino ri norora mundu uyu guku ari
ukarora history ya mundu kana hena history number 1 ya domestic abuse and violence na number 2 ya sexual offenses na I thank God dikwisi kwena register ya sexual offenders okora ndo matiwe ukarora kana mundu ucio
no court fit
how koguo
kana predators
yes kwena predators kwena pedophiles kwena andu acio mathakagira sanity insanity uguo na mekuo na mena
no nginya atumia twarume
always across na nimekeraga wega muno na magacomaira
no mundu ena murimu fulani
ena murimu mental disorders vikwishi kwena andu metagwa narcissist
to camouflage
yes kwena andu metagwa narcissist and people do not understand they are narcissists and narcissism is real
but what is it nikekeu wagweta
kegwere narcissist no narcissist it's across both genders man or woman aho acemania nake awektaga kindu gitagwo love bombing agakugutha kiwendo
kuruju
ukona ne baingira ukona uyu niwe is my perfect soulmate
uyu nda hairo ne ngai
uria tonde
aragibare nyamu
aciange marare nyamu agwika love bombing no ni aguthomete mundu maria wendete akamahananithania kindu kiria yothe ukoragwo wendete thiini kama kana we muthuri kindu kiria giothe wendete thiini wa mutumia kana we mutumia kindu giothe ungikorwo wendete thiini wa muthuri amenya ni waingira gitamai ru akambia kuruta mask nowadays andu ingi ni ku mask mara mask muno akambia ku unmask akaruta true colors ciake akambia gukumanipulate ndi ndumuheire information yaku mundu maku mothe agagwika kindu gitagwo manipulation agaku isolate na relatives ciaku na friends ciaku
akuherithania na andu anyu
akuherithania niguo riu agutereme wega ta saitani uria ateremagira mundu wega proper akagaruruka arahari muraika yo tutieragwo bible-ini that Satan masquerades as the angel of light.
He was an angel.
Yes, he was an angel. Akagaruruka agatwika shaitani agawika kindu gitagwo gaslighting. Gaslighting agakwirwo no ngimurehera evidence haha nino niyo thimu wikite ona no rigira nyetini we anga ni uraguruka agakwira ni uraguruka akwira we nduramenya uri uraiga agako devalue then agagutwara stage itagwo devaluing agagutarura uguo nona ngoro yaku ramunengerete kamitarura wega
gatwika nguo ndembuku
kagutarura
gitagwo gitakunya
na agaguikiria
agacoka agekate
agagucokia
ugwetereire niki
turamenya kio menyaga kio cire kio menya rume ukagia kindu gitagwo trauma bonding na counselor ni agutwira trauma bonding
na ndona ni thomete counselor
we urona atiriri mundu uyu ni aranyendete na riu niki aranjika uru niki akahura akajikia kiugo
ndio ni hari physical kana verbal
kwi aria mekaga psychological na kwi aria mathia nginya physical na emotional na financial okoro we na sexual okoro we na besha okoro uramuhe besha riria arenda kindu kuma kuri we agagusumairira hello my darling arikia akwira na wewe saitani we riu karigu atiriri
ni agutarura ringi
agutarura ringi riu hindi mwe sawa hindi mwe ndari sawa riu atwika confused riu uyu mundu we ni hanya ni aranyenda ndaranyenda twi hamwe tutiri hamwe guku ndari guku confusion yo kama yo realize ni kuingirire we uguthie gwetha ndagitari haha mutwe wa
session
wambe cokaniririo
miaka iri kana
no kuri ha session icio
ewe arikania nawe
agioka akaguo ni etua muno One atua muno. And by the way, no getha ngindirio horo cio rauga ri 70% of men are narcissists.
Yes, narcissists are real.
Menyire.
Taruga menyire. Ndenda tuikerie niguo tuke twaririe horo wa arume na twaririe horo wa andu aya
era kumuteithia mwemenya muri andu wega muno
tabarira yake muri asante sana ndungigwa maundu maya tiga kundu kungi tiga haha okawa good morning Waihura and the team. I'm a married lady. No, a married lady approaches a man and had sex with him. In the process, she divorces. Yeah, in the process she divorces. She now claims the child who she has is the man's arenakem ekehikoinere. Arauga riu mwana uyu no undu uyu.
Uria ari nake thini wake.
Uria divorce kana uyu wa side.
Uria wa side.
Mwana ni wake.
The child with this kind of man. Should this man take responsibility niguo aroria? So mutumia uyu uri ekehikoine akagĩa na mpango wa kando. Agĩa na mpango wa kando akohanda. After miaka 3 Mario mpango wa kando akadivorce. Riu ni ocokete guka kwi mpango wa kando kumwana by the way mwana uyu uri ti wa muthuri uria no waku. Ucio akoria guthiaga atia. Hello Njenga. Sorry. Hello Njenga, mimi hadi leo sijui baba yangu, but nikiuliza mam ana change topic wallahi. Ni mundu.
Ilo naibu anathini.
Ni mundu gwiciria no right ya mundu kumenya ithe.
It is there.
Right ya mundu kumenya ithe. Atumia tigai koima ciana. Kava athie ithe ucio amurege.
Iyo nona ni murevi kana ni muici.
Athie ithe ucio amurege.
Matayarishaga wega muno na magetikira
kana riri atumia matiga kuigerera irori Ciira unakwira gwatirire thoguo ragirwo ni kirori
kana athire ruraya kia gucoka
acinaga waru na gukumoro anga kwiriire anga hane tuikiria ri ena wale magiaga twana leo tugiaga kagea kana thiini wa kihiko kwa muhimu
ona
nene brenda ni ororia
tuikirie
kagea kada na ndui njeka no tigaku
tuikirie ati mwana ori ithe akero akinyirwo ni kiroria kiuma kambara
Next on Shambala Wanyama.
Amjapanda ndege kwa sababu hamkunyoli water.
You live a sad, pathetic life.
Between food and life, which is more essential.
Hannah, what your husband did is illegal.
The bishops are ganging up against you. Sisi sio kama serikali. Mungu aongezangi ushuru.
Shambala Wanyama. New episodes available every Saturday, only on Viusasa.
Goko kwa Alpha Mabati, we customer witu we wafata muno, na nikio tuguthondekagira mabati makugita nyumba yaku, magikiro kia iguru. Edito aria mohegereire wira-ini wao, makwendagiria kiria kiagirire, ni undu wa kiria urenda kugita, kuringana na mithemba itu ngurani ya mabati, iria tukoragwo nayo. Wicagurire kuma mithemba ya marangi matiganite, na muigana wa ibati riria urenda, niguo uhonokie mbeca ukigita. Nitui ati mahinda ni mbeca, na nikio tugukinyagiria kiria urenda, oro haria uri guothe bururi-ini, na mathaa 22 tutegũkũrĩhia. Tukoragwo Northern Bypass hakuhĩ na Kĩiyũ Referral Hospital, na rĩu twĩna rũhonge rwerũ Nyeri Town kũng'ethanĩra na Toyota Kenya. Alpha Mabati, the roofing industry bearing us.
Nidakugeithia mwiroreri wakwa haria hothe ugikorwo nidamunyita ugeni thiini wa crusade itu iregakorwo mweri 3 Kasarani Stadium mweri wa December. Nitukamuhoera nitukuhorithia aria othe mohetwo micie yanyu ona ria kwa gutari kindu kigiaga ningamuhe maguta na Ngai uria urutaga mundu kuma haria thina-ini niagakuruta thina-ini muthenya ucio ni Kasarani Stadium. Ugoka na Ngai nagakurathima.
Ũngĩenda mũgũnda mwega wĩ hakuhĩ na taũni.
Ũngĩenda mũgũnda ũtarĩ na ciira.
Ũngĩenda mũgũnda wĩna ready title deed.
Security na thukuru.
Kanitha na thibitarĩ.
Handũ ũkoroka gwaka rũciũ.
Nĩ mawega.
Njĩtagwo Ndonga, mũrũgamĩrĩri Mawega Company Limited. Na ithuĩ nĩ ithuĩ tũrutaga andũ kombori-inĩ tũkamatua komborithania.
Njĩtagwo Njenga, Director Mawega Company Limited, na ithuĩ nĩ ithuĩ twendagia mĩgũnda ĩrĩa hakuhĩ na mataũni. Ũguo wenda mũgũnda gũra na
Mawega Company Limited.
Na rĩu
wona warĩkia kũrĩha mũgũnda waku tũragũitĩra rori ya mahiga ma kwambĩrĩria mũthingi. Tũhũre thimũ 0798 555 444.
Mawega Company Limited, mũciĩ waku wa ũigithia.
Ũngĩenda kwamũkĩra rwĩmbo rũrũ twĩkĩta rũgambi thĩinĩ wa thimũ-inĩ yaku no ũndũ mũhũthũ ũgwĩka ũkwandĩka star 862 hash na ndũkariganĩrwo Inooro nĩ mũciĩ wa aini othe.
Mtu wangu, imagine kuna over 1000 ways to win on shabiki.com. Usimiss out, pata multi-bet boost massive ya 1000% ukicheza on shabiki.com. Cheza sasa na shabiki.com na upate up to 1000% multi-bet boost.
Tubet, min shabiki na nadeku place tena, nilieka kichwa yangu ikabai tena.
Nĩ ngatho nyingĩ mũno nĩ gũthiĩ na mbere na gũikarania na ithuĩ. Nĩ drona SMS yanyu nyingi mũno. Nilipoa mtoto na mzee nikiwa shule na kutoka hapo sijaimwona tena na mtoto anadai kujua babake nifanye nini. Huyo ginaka akawa very good debate. I've written a book on narcissism. It's a serious mental disorder but many do not know about it. I wish nyogia twira witagwo na tumenye ibuku ya kuleta gwatea. My husband anakaa kama ni dysfunctional, anafanya kazi yake vizuri lakini akikumbuka aliopitia rejection ya mama yake inamsumbua sana. Nisaidieni. Muthuri mwega muno no aririkana rejection area agereirio ni nyina horoka ugoka umuthumbulite muno. I lived with a narcissist when he turned his mistakes around and made me apologize for his own mistakes. Akauga, but I thank God one day I woke up and I decided enough is enough. Even after I left he tried to manipulate me but I had already had enough. He gave up and now I am free. Gusia no atumura dereti dito muno jabawira
atarere ona icio to mwasinyita kuma riri arumeri ta mutani ri katwe na jengari arumeri fatie kwinithora kwinithora kurira
ini ukia kurira ni
jamani na jenga hali hajojia kerera
agihota kurira ni mothe maumeri the better.
Is it niki psychological ni murwaru
murwaru
tondu riri one tigikuo ti loss no aria ukona mundu ucio naberia goita maithori
na kaingĩ rĩu nĩkĩo wonaga amwe makanyua nĩgetha mahote kũrĩra tondu wona wanyua rĩ njohiri nĩ yeheragia inhibitions ciothe
yeheragia thoni
ciothe na nĩ njĩraga atumia aingĩ rĩrĩa ũrona mũthuri waku agĩũka mũciĩ akarĩra ũmũthikĩrĩrie mũno tondu hĩndĩ ĩyo nĩguo atuĩka kana karĩa
ũrankarĩtie arũme kwĩnithora
nĩ marĩre kwanja gwakwa therapy nĩ moya arĩa manoka magaita rĩithũri ũguo ndĩmeraga nĩ wahona tondu kuma ũrĩa mũnini weragwo atĩ
yo ti mental disorder
hapana nĩ ũndũ wa gĩtinda ũrĩrĩte bara atĩ ume haha ũtinde mũthenya mũgima ũkĩrĩraga ta mũndũ mũrwaru. That is not the one I'm talking about. No mũndũrũme angĩhinyĩrĩrĩka biũ ahote kũrĩra nĩ mũrimũ aruta thĩinĩ wa mwĩrĩ wake. Na rĩu aingĩ rĩ ta gũkũ gwitũ Central mathiaga kũnyua kũu kamũkora arĩtie nginya akarĩra no andũ aingĩ maugaga atĩa mũndũrũme ũrĩa atũraga arĩra no rũciũ atuĩka soba nginya ndahotaga kwaria ndahotaga kuuga ũndũ
na thoni cia nĩ araririkana nĩ ararĩraga
ndĩraugaga ingĩkorwo ndĩna bouncers rĩ makandwara mbari ngakora thuri acio bouncer no anyita bouncer
kuwethera ke marekerithia macicio maingĩ
nĩgetha ũngĩkora thuri aingĩ kwanja ku manyuaga nĩ makona mathĩna maingĩ mũno na nĩ ngwenda kuga ũhoro wa mũthuri ũyũ arerwo nĩ arutaga wĩra wega, rĩngĩ nĩ amagũragĩra irio, akamarĩhĩra nyũmba, akamahumba wega, no he maũndũ maingĩ matathiaga wega. Na ĩno nĩyo niĩ ngoragwo ndĩna interest nayo, childhood trauma. Ona mũthĩ page-inĩ yakwa Susan Gitau Counseling Foundation kana Dr. Susan Gitau nĩ njũririe andũ nĩ mũĩ childhood experiences citũ nĩcio ishapaga kana nĩcio itũmaga tũkorwo tũkĩbehave ũrĩa tũbehaveaga tũrĩ andũ agima. Amwe ona nĩ kũhona, ona inyuĩ rĩngĩ mũhoneire wa mwĩna ũrĩa njĩka nĩ
gũtuĩka kĩrĩa nĩ gũtuĩka counseling sessions.
Ũhoro wa narcissism rĩ nĩ wangenia nĩ kumĩra, no he ũndũ njũĩ naguo ũrathiĩ na mbere. Atumia arĩa nao matahota kũnyita ndeto ĩno wega, no rĩu tarĩu we wakiri wĩ mũthu na angĩ marendorera harĩa nĩ athũ. Amwe arĩa matarahota kũnyita ndeto ĩno wega rĩ, kaũndũ kanini mũthuri auga hũrĩra nguo bathi, we narcissist. Rĩu haha nĩ tũkwenda tũthomithie atumia othe nginya thĩinĩ wa kanitha, tondũ nake mũthuri ũtendete
no hote kwendana,
no tehete gĩtĩo mandangĩhota kũhe arĩa angĩ.
No tũreke tũrĩrie arũme arĩa super arĩa oigati arĩa
functional,
they are functional, batuĩka atĩrĩrĩ nake mũtumia agĩkorwo nĩ arenda gũgũterĩ no tũmĩre nyamũ ĩyo atĩ tondũ no ti tondũ wawe no hena gĩcamba kĩngĩ kĩ haha kando nĩenda gwetha kĩremithia kĩrĩa mũgũtigana, so agagũtũmĩra
na nĩ maita merĩ mũtumia no eke ũguo na ndanamenya kana mũndũrũme. No hau njenga niho ngwĩraga atĩrĩrĩ, nĩrona andũ agima mahana ciana, nĩkĩ gũtũma ũhũthĩre njĩra ndaihu ũguo? Tũtigane kĩa wega okorwo twĩna ciana tũhetwo nĩ Ngai tũrere wega na moke mahone, tondũ kĩrĩa gĩtũmaga andũ aingĩ maremwo nĩ gũtigana njenga-rĩ nĩ ironda, kana ũkaririkana mũndũ ũyũ akũithĩtie marũni maita 10 na rĩu nĩ mwagacĩra nĩ ikara wega na enda gũgũtiga hingo ĩyo, koguo ũkarora ũkona kaba ng'ang'ane tũkorwo tũrĩ onake mũthuri ũngĩ
nginya mũndũ indo nje twethete nake.
No reke ngwĩre korwo andũ mamenya muoyo waku wĩ bata mũno gũkĩra indo ici cia thĩ, tondũ ũgathiĩ gokire ũtarĩ kĩndũ nũrũ na harĩa mocarĩ, tondũ nĩndekire research yakwa na andũ a mocarĩ ndathire ngĩhingũragĩrwo guothe, kana wĩ State House tarĩu Kenyatta National Hospital nĩ marĩ the State House kana private wing maigagwo wega mũno, ũragio kwenda kũmenya mũndũ waku na magũrũ kana mũtwe, no ndũrĩ kaũndũ gũtirĩ hĩndĩ wĩkĩragwo na hau na thuci teno yaku, ona kaburi arĩa tũgwĩkagĩra no magemio coka ikarĩo nĩ
mũndũ igagwo mocarĩ njaga
ĩni ona ndigetwo Dr. Susan Gitau Reverend Bishop nĩũrona nĩũrona njenga kũrĩa mocarĩ ũrĩa waumire ũkĩheo tũrĩtwo tũrĩa wario noguo gacoka harĩa. Koguo indo ici andũ nao matindaga ndũgaikare hau ũragwo nĩ ũndũ wa indo, tathiĩ wĩna moko agĩkorwo kwanja ndũrĩ mũtinie umĩria kwĩ mũthuri na mũtumia, na kũrĩ athuri hete gĩtĩo mũno amwe njũĩ mũndũ augire ciana ciakwa nyũmba ĩno thaka ũguo niĩ tũtingĩrũĩra na mũtumia wakwa, ciana ciakwa ikomage nja tarori, akĩoya ũguo kabagi agĩthiĩ ciana igaikara wega na mũthuri ũcio tondũ we nĩ ageretie ũrĩa angĩhota gwĩka thĩinĩ wa kĩhiko kĩu, Ngai akĩmũrathima. Koguo nĩ ngwenda njĩre athuri onao matige kũng'ang'ana ũguo rĩu nĩ kũrwara wĩ mũrwaru, tondũ warĩ angĩkorwo wĩna ciana 5 na mũtumia we ũragwo kũu katũtarona makĩũragwo itingĩikara nani ndĩ mũthuri, na nĩ ũrona mũndũ ũyũ mwĩnake kila wakati nĩkĩ ategũgwĩka. Na kũrĩ atumia onao tiga ũguo tũrerwo haha, kwanja atumia mangĩtuĩka narcissist they are the worst, tondũ magaga nginya gathona kanini. Mũthuri kĩndũ kĩmũkuaga mũno ngoro-inĩ yake nĩ ciana ona mũthuri ũrwarĩte mũtwe no onaga akĩenda ciana ciake. No atumia aingĩ nao matiũĩ atĩrĩrĩ njenga athuri nĩ mendete ciana ciao, ndika nĩ tondũ matatindaga makiuga I love you nĩ ngwendete gũkĩmahĩmbĩria kũmamumunya, atumia meciragia athuri matiendete ciana ciao. Na nĩ ndĩrenda ndĩmere niĩ ndĩ mũtumia ndũkeherie ithe wa ciana kwĩ ciana ciaku, to mathĩna marĩa maingĩ ndehagĩrwo ndĩritũ niĩ nyonaga matiagĩrĩire. Ciana icio ũraigua ikiuria baba wao nũ atĩ ngoragwo nĩ niĩ ndĩramorĩria, niĩ ndĩmetagĩria nginya mbica ngera mũtumia kauga rĩu morenda kũrumũrũria maũndũ ma tene mangĩ maritũ mũno, ngamwĩra rĩu rĩ ukwenda gũtũra gũkũ gwakwa ũrĩhagĩra mwana waku therapy, ukwenda gũtũra mwana waku rĩngĩ ahũthagĩra ndawa, ukwenda mwana waku a justify gũkorwo agĩikara mwena wa hũro mũno, ũguo nĩguo ũrenda. Niĩ ndenda kũmera ũhoro wa
makabica ya mu
ni aiko ni uremirwo ni kuheana ndeto ngakwira uhe nawe ukahe rutha mwana ngamuria ni ukwenda heo rutha rwa gugutariria na to ithu tutihenanagia ri uria werwo ugacoka ukona nginya mwana na nyina ringi igwa rugano rwa nyina nginya tacio igwa uhoro wa kunyitokea hinya akamenya akamenya nikyo mami aturite appreciate kwaja makinya secondary niguo moragia muno ni magimara urakimuhitha niki na githungu giki tugaga uhoro wa kwimenya identity formation kwaja hindio me wanake
I don't mean either identity formation or identity crisis
eni no na role confusion eni mwana uyu akarigagwo am I a girl or a boy tondu ru atumia amwe tacio matuikaga very hard matiendaga nginya arume around them kuhota kuona nginya rerete mwana ucio uku na ndarenda nginya hutio ni mundu ki na ndarenda nginya umena
ingi matumagira cia kuga ihiotiga arumene ngui arumene
nguri acio ni ndira kuwara itia tuturero
no to experience cia tene
ni handu hahonere ungihona ungihona ona no ende mwana waku amenye ithenu kana ni mwandu wa kugucia mugogoteni kana no we president wa Kenya
you know displaced aggression ati to mwamenanire na muthuri kuori ukenda
ukona gacure no kona ni uria gukire mahana guo ukire murwaru tondu mwana uyu ri aciarwe kiumbe uyu tithe kugurire ona mwana uyu kaigua uru umenye we murwaru urenda uhone iyo niyo turauga uhoro wa trauma na gutiri kindu kiuruta trauma murimo ucio wa trauma ni muru tondu andu othe monekaga mesawa wahutia kaundu ka tugetaga trigger akabururuka karumana akaria uru andu aya mona makiuga magitanaga rumeanga ni ndu marito mothe urauga ungirumarumiriro guo
kuri tari hona
ni kiugu gwitura ho tugutura ho na hau niho turameta tukauga atiriri kanitha yukire tondu kanitha andu ingira mathia kanithari mathia magietha kihonie kia mathina mao na kanitha iria ciugite thaici na kanitha uria kurugama thaici kana religion iria kurugama ni iria ku embrace mental health no getha tugakuria mundu body mind and spirit no riu kaingire ungihoya mutu kwi mufea kana kwi pastor na bishop ni egukuhe niguo ungimweria etata he mandiko thini wa kirikaniro maria mekunja kana thina uyu nago ni egukuhe no ta muri uhoro wa mind mental egukuigirira moko ugerie deliverance cikarema no eringi kiria wina kio ni maroruha na irema iria wagereire
cia maundu matani
utari wahona tugacoka tukona kanitha irathii kagwa tondu kanitha nayo ihurite andu ki arwaru ugathii mawira-ini ugakora kuihurite andu arwaru ugoka bururi wa Kenya atongoria ni arwaru na riu na nikio onaga uyu woman wa Kiambu ringi anitire ciugo cia Kĩgĩna tondu horo wa kwirwo ati nduri sawa thini wa meciria maku ona ithuĩ tutiĩtĩkagĩra ta mũrimũ wa burnout ta rĩu gwitũ ũngĩũka university thaa ici nĩ tũreka igerio ta rĩu kũrĩa gwitũ Africa Nazarene University ndio niguo lecturers mũtararanĩria wega ũgakora harĩa rĩngĩ tũkona tũmitandao kona ũrĩa ire na nĩ igũkire no rĩu korwo andũ nĩ ogĩri makamenya rĩu burnout nĩguo igũrũ no na niguo turahoya tondu mugitera kwa mutari niguo wona we menya ona ithu njugaga tiga ni guthoma counseling nie njenga njugaga tiga ni guthoma na ni mathomo ndirenda tukorwo namo o handu hothe haruma mathomo ma kwimenya self awareness ni ona ni njugaga ringi ngiri kuria tondu ndarigago uyu no ambuyu uriku uyu kana uyu na ria ndambie guthoma counseling ndari mwarimu wa secondary no ria ndaingire ndirathomera arutwo yakwa ri niĩ ni mũrwaru mo ndenda wone mwarimu ũrĩa wĩraga mwana yundu na yundu we kwanja rĩ tondu uretwo Peter Muthoni nĩ ũramenya inyuĩ kwanja inyuĩ ciana cia single mother nĩ inyuĩ mwĩna thĩna mũno ũyũ mwarimu rĩ sawa ndarĩ sawa agacoka agagwĩta ngunia ũyũ mwarimu sawa tondu mwarimu mwega na mwarimu ũigĩrĩrĩkĩte nĩ hinya wĩigua akĩruma mwana tondu nĩ arenda marks njega na ni arenda agetia na mwana uyu no arimu aingi kuria cukuru ri o turia turia no andu aingi thini wa bururi uyu mahingicanirwo biu ta gitwike nyina wa mwana na ithe wa mwana ukorwo we ni wahingicanirwo niki uraturerera niki uratuhe uratuhe kindu rimwe tutakahota guikarana na njiraga andu horo wa hitira ungimoria raithia ciarire ndireka parental guidance macukuru-ini kana makanitha-ini uiguaga agikwira hitira ni moragani ari mundu moru muno hana ngamoria iciaria hitira ri mahanaga atia ati ucio tutakiui ruga kimahe hitira athondekirwo guo hanire ni koguo ri andu ni matigege kuona ciana kana ona we ingi kuona nyoni uri ohana no ngwenda kumenya na hau thutha muciari woyo no tondu mirerere ya ciana ni tukwenda tumenye ni ya bata muno amwe itu ndakwira ni kuhona kana gwitikira guikara system-ini otherwise maundu maria maingi andu mekagwo me ciana ni aciari matekumenya onao tondu amwe makirio arwaru nimo maroka ru nimo maumirira mayorona mamici itu rira ikara ugakora mundu ringi onaga baba wake hura nyina ugerio mwikio mwire wajikoe bas no arurumukia kindu ukarigwo kari hadahutia ginya nawe okama ukauga mundu aturia njetere nawe tondu nawe ndwahonete makuri ni mwambirie gwikana atia kurwa thini wa muci ugu ni turahoya andu mahote kuthoma uhoro uyu wa kwimenya na kanitha yukire tondu ni ku andu mathiaga na ni ndiramera atiriri kanitha waku ngiendwo ni andu aria angi ni undu wa maundu megoreka wina programs winacio reke moka program no na taru Daughters of Zion tondu we ni nyonaga ni uyu horo wa Jubilee Christian Church Daughters of Zion ni program interdenominational matiugaga atiriri nyu muri ya Jesu uyu wa APCA kana muri ya Jesu uyu wa ACK moka gothe na atumia makohiga muno uhoro wa financial management magathoma uhoro wa ureri magathoma uhoro wa kwiyenda kumenya iheo ciao koguo kanitha nayo yohiga tondu ni kuhiga kanitha ikuhiga agikorwo ni murenda gutharamia uyu tigai gukorwo ati maronda andu magatuthekia kuria kanitha no ukiingira kwao tondu riria moka therapy umakaga muno ukarigwa yani waihura maundu maya mothe nimo akoretwo akigerera katutangitua kanitha uria turaka tuheanaga kariko gaitu ga 10 na ki ati ni ku andu mariuka kuhonera tondu mokaga mari na ruo thiucio ndirakwira ri maeraga mutongoria wa head of missions ACK Church Mount Kenya South makamwira atiriri uria watwika umuthi tutiri twikuringi tutiri ginya ne amahithire no guka itondu no makirwo ni Susan uroka wa boy more oya kaitu kautonaga haria kimure gutwira ki no ne amahithire no uroka gigikinya kuo maugire uria watwika no uria watwira no uria twamenya ithu ni twinuka turi andu ahonu ta thuri na twanyua nao ucuru na tunya to ni athuri agikuyu mari ingi ku tugacoka tukirianira nao tukiaragia
athuri akanitha bena thina
ati kaimu ni koretia no ina thina muno kwani ni wakanitha ati uria wi haria njari ona niwe mwegega to ni wa hera jehereria Jesu agathia gebanga iwe nakora haria ugwitu ni maundu andu makwirore
haya roria atiriri hena kiuria legal na again muiretu arauga atiriri ararikirie nigo ararikirie form 4 mwaka uyu narikia form 4 andikite fortunately niko na ball lakini mama yangu aruga fortunately lakini mama yangu anataka huyu jamaa akwe arrested. He loves me, I love him, and he has said he will take care of the baby. What should I do?
Tariga fortunate.
Ena miaka igana?
Nihiko alikia.
So amefika 18.
Gosiria riwe 18. Gaiko nihiko akirekia form 4 na ena andari. Riu mutumia nyina wa muiretu uyu arauga mundurume ucio ni anyitwo. Na kamwiretu akauga mundurume arakenyitwo ati anu wakwa twendanite na ni arauga ni agwika ati mwana ha riu haguthia ati.
Okay. Kishokia kiu na nyambe njokie kiria kingi gikuritio he uria urari kihiko-ini aracoka araima nanja aracoka ara divorce muthuri wake na kuratwika mwana ti wa muthuri ucio divorce ni wa uyu
no mpango wa kando
ukana mpango uyu wa kando ena responsibility iguru ria mwana uyu kana ni mupango kana no uria gwathire ucio muthuri agerirwa tekerekia mwana ucio
no ti kũrĩa araumĩte kĩhiko-inĩ.
Watho ugĩte atĩrĩrĩ baba mwanai kana mwĩ kĩhiko-inĩ kana mũtirĩ kĩhiko-inĩ kana kũrĩa mwacemanirie mũgĩka ũrĩa mwekire tondũ nĩ mũĩ ũrĩa mwekire mwagĩrĩirwo gũtĩkĩra mwana ũcio.
Kaũtarĩ kwega gwa thuri.
Niĩ kĩũria njũragia atĩrĩrĩ andũ aya mũndũ etwaraga wika kana mũkoragwo mũrĩ erĩ kĩu nĩkĩo kĩũria njũragia. Aca mũndũ akoragwo wika kana mũkoragwo mũrĩ erĩ koguo mũgĩtĩkĩra kĩ maumĩrĩra ma ciĩko cianyu mwĩtĩkĩre maumĩrĩra ma ciĩko cianyu. It is also part of
healing. Mwĩririkanie marĩa mwerekeire gwĩka.
Ni ũtaneka ũndũ tamba wĩyũrie ũndũ ũyũ ndĩreka consequences nĩ kĩ.
Mwana ũndekorerwo koguo ekorwo nĩ mũndũ rĩu
ũcio baba wao ũcio mwenye ũrĩa arĩ baba the biological father.
Haya akioha nĩ koko ũrĩa Kĩgĩna.
Nira tucokerie ũyũ nake wa mbere reke to balance ndafurire uhoro wa sexual defilement hapenaga mwana atakinyite miaka 18 and it can be either way. Na thikũ ici twimenyerere muno tondu the boy child is in danger but the girl child onake are in danger. Koguo defilement ni mwana atakinyite 18 years. Na defilement ni gukoragwo area ya ciana cierĩ cigekora ni under 18 kana ugekora ta mũirĩtu ni under 18 na mwanake ni over 18. Rĩu nĩho aingĩraga child offenders. Mangĩkorwo gĩkota kĩu nĩ gĩkĩkĩte rĩu agũturayo eta a child offender. Haya angĩkorwo mũirĩtu ni under 18 mwanake ni over 18 rĩu hau nĩho achanjagwo na kĩ na defilement. Na defilement you have to prove there is attempted defilement and there is the actual defilement. Koguo no muhaka prove. Haya mwana kinya over 18 wathora mu recognize ni adult.
Sio mũndũ mũgima.
Nena matua hena consent. There is something called consent. Ona hĩndĩ tukoragwo na case ma rape tondũ rape is without consent when you forcefully force yourself. Haha naho nona mũirĩtu araiga we ni wendo menaguo. Nona rĩu ndaraiga atĩ nĩ case ya defilement.
Unfortunately.
Na araiga nginya nona ciugo ciake
fortunately.
And which it is even rather sad tondu arakena tondu actually ndanafuata njĩra ĩrĩa yagĩrĩire. No rĩu nona rĩmwe nĩ makĩhenagio na mageciria they are in love. Nĩ kĩonye ndakwarĩria andũ aya nini angĩkorwo nĩ wahota ũkũrĩa kũngĩhotekeka na ndiũ kana no gũtũire please be a virgin. Tiga gũtengerera maũndũ maya. Tiga gũtengerera ũrĩa wothe ũngĩhota. Kaba ũtige gũtengerera maũndũ maya tondu nĩkuo wĩthiaga ũkehingũra ũgekorera maũndũ maingĩ. Mwana ũyũ nĩ hĩndĩ arakinya 18 years. The question is ready gũtuĩka mwana. Is it a child becoming a mother when he's still a child to a child?
Nĩ mwana.
Nĩ mwana ũragimario kia hinya. Nona he stage a miss. Nikio wonaga atĩrĩrĩ na ndĩraiganio the no he stage a miss. Ugekora rĩrĩa mũndũ mũnene areka maũndũ ũkarigwo ai mũndũ ũyũ maũndũ marĩa angĩkire rĩrĩa 18 19 20 21 22 23 nĩ mwaroka gwĩka gũkũ rĩrĩa akũrire. Tondũ he stage a miss. Tondũ hĩndĩ ĩyo arĩkia mwana 18 agĩrĩirwo gũkorwo akĩgaidwo what is your career guidance. Nĩkĩ gĩgwĩka na mũtũrĩre waku nĩ warĩkia high school ũkũrora nako nĩ course ĩrĩkũ ũrenda gwĩka nĩ gũshape mũtũrĩre wa mwana ũyũ. Rĩu we handũ ha wĩcirie mau nĩ kuongithia nĩ nabe nĩ pampers nĩ angakĩni nĩ mũthurio ona ndũrĩ ready.
No mũciari kĩhiko nĩ kĩmwana.
Ona ndũĩ kĩhiko nĩ kĩ nĩ wahenio.
Mũciari ũrauga kĩmwana gĩikio thĩinĩ nĩ ũndũ wa
mũciari ũyũ ena ruo.
Kĩrekire.
Ena ruo nona.
Karĩ kĩmwana ona tutarakĩmenya.
Tutiramenya no tutiĩ nĩ mwana kana nĩ mũthuri kana no we don't atakiugĩte. No nona mũciari ũyũ ena ruo. Tondu thaa ici mũirĩtu ũyũ ndaramenya nĩkĩ gĩkĩka agoka kwĩmenya baadaye. Thaa ici arona nĩ gwĩtaũkwo. Na nĩkĩo tũraiga atĩrĩrĩ reke tũbundithie ciana citũ sex education. Reke matige kũmenya maũndũ maya mitandao-inĩ na kũhenio. Reke twĩre tumabundithie the truth and the right way. Tugathondeka the right foundation thĩinĩ wa mwana ũyũ. Ti kwambia rĩrĩa kũrire nĩguo ũrambia kũmenya agaguthiago agagutithia uramenya ru ni ta kumenya na experience yaku riria muturire ugu already ugikitie deep end niguo urageria guswim umenya kana ni uguswim uhote kuma reke twaragie ni ndirenda kwariria ciari reke twaragie maundu maya reke mwana waku atige guthie gubundithio na kuria nja
yarema yaremeke ata
to ugithamba moko uge
no wageria no nduka assume acha ndukagwete kindu ta kiu guku nona wamwira atia
itatwira tere to joje gana ndatuikirie
in fact ndatuikirie
teenagers to juxtapose aterere either they are young adults ka they are teenagers watho na ugite atia itondo aikoro ni mundu responsible ucio ni aratwarwo guku kwa vida na mirimani mirimani abo matwaretwo hau
matwaretwo ingi muno
matwaretwo guo
macira maciara ni maingi
muno by the way check maratwarwo ku na lori macira ta kura ile ciari cia
utie kumenya haki cia
kura macira hau na ho gutukira hari either angiangando either mari college mari university hau na ho nuyu ukurerithio mwana
ikatiriri utanacokia niguo ndigagutinie na ndrona mathaa maitu ni mathiire ri ke tuikirie tugicoka ucokie kiu Wakauga hello Njenga Kagodo Jr. here. I'm an author of a book called Becoming a Man. Kauga forwarded by Dr. Susan, and Kauga pass my regards to her. So many children are really affected by absent fathers as well as childhood traumas from their parents, and they therefore project this through misconduct, pain, anger, addictions, and many other things. And parents should be intentional in healing from their childhood traumas. Otherwise, their children will be forced to heal from those wounds. Childhood traumas. Kwe maudu asiari amwe mareka riu kwenda kwao ni maudu maria magereire nao maria nyinyi. Okora mundu ina miaka 40 kauga maudu maria ndekirwo ni asiari akwa nimo matuma ringi nginya ngahura ciana ciakwa uru muno kana mutumia tandu mutumia ucio atwandikira atwira uria muthuri wake ni mwega no akinya handu akaririkana rejection ya rejectirwo ni nyina akamaka muno tuikerie.
You are the lucky winner of 100,000 shillings. Unaona ni how much hapo hivyo Nancy?
100.
Unapanga kufanya nini do?
Ninapanga kufanyia biashara at least nipate.
Ni biz gani unafanya Nancy?
Huwa ninafanya tu biashara ya kuuza nguo.
Okay.
Na sasa nitaongezea.
Sasa ni kuongeza stock, si ndio?
Ni kuongeza.
Zidi kujipanga Nancy, si ndio? Haya, asante sana.
Asante.
Wajoeri nini urathekerera taitu ciakwa ikiura
ndakwirire kuigithia ngondo ni Brico Home ni hokeku na bei ni facirire ta Christmas ino ri wagura mugunda marakuhe mburi me na ici cietagwo shopping voucher kinya gift hampers.
Jetawa Paul Waiganjo early Christmas offer na Brico Homes Limited twina broti guku mwena wa Roiro East Kamakis na thogora wa 750 matu 300 na Joska Mala 480. Payment plan up to 6 months. Kwa uhoro makeria tuhurire thimo namba 0721077077 kana utosherere Jewel Complex Roysambu 2nd floor kurigania na TRM.
Ni urenda kugita nyumba yaku na mabati ma gutura na ma uthaka wa kiriu horera riu tondu kambuni igatu ya Ruiru Mabati Factory Limited iria yoikaine na wendia nguthi wa mabati ma gikiro kia iguru maria metiragia mbura nene na riua rihio twi haha ni undu waku. Endia itu ni mohigeire wira-ini wao koguo ni magutaraga na magakwenderia kuringana na muigana kana muhiano wa nyumba yaku ukahuthia wira na ukahonokia mbeca. Wicagurire kuma kwi mithemba ngurani ta Jenga Tile, Europe Tile, Box Profile na mangi maingi. Oho ni monekaga na marangi ngurani na tukakurehe
tũrehera nginya o gwaku mũrango-inĩ gwa kahinda ka mathaa 24 tu. Tũcerere Ruiru Town kana ũtũhũrĩre thimũ namba 0111 050 700. Ruiru Mabati Factory, mali safi kwa bei poa.
Sasa kwa thao moja tu unaweza pata third party cover for your private motor vehicle valid for 30 days. Say goodbye to expensive motor vehicle insurance. Pata bima kutoka Direct Line Assurance. Kujisajili bonyeza *487#. Weka namba plate ya gari yako, ID namba yako, email address yako na ulipe thao moja tu. And your digital cover will be sent to you instantly. Collect your sticker at your nearest Total service station. Dial *487# upate third party motor insurance valid for 30 days. Pap, ni thao tu.
Harĩria mũbango mũkinyanĩru wa biacara yaku na wĩkĩre mũigana wa mbeca iria irabatarania. Njĩra cia wendia oro hamwe na mĩtaratara ya mũrutĩre wa wĩra.
KCB ni yetu.
KCB ni yangu. KCB is mine.
KCB ni yetu. For people, for better.
Nĩ ngatho nyingĩ mũno nĩ gũthiĩ na mbere wakairia tũcokereirie ndenda gũtwara ĩmwe kwa ĩmwe nginya kũrĩa igoti-inĩ kũrĩa kwĩna judgment kana itua rĩa igoti rĩrathomwo gwa kahinda gaka rĩa Finance Act. Reke tũigũre kwana.
Appear alongside the Max Money for the first and second respondents.
That is the Attorney General.
Yes, my lord.
National Assembly.
May I please you, my lords and my lady, my name is George Murugara. I do appear with Mr. Sheriff Sam Mwendwa, Mr. Barak Awath Hamed for the third and fourth respondents.
Speaker of the Senate. Kenya Revenue Authority.
May it please you, my lord, my lady, Mohoro Kiriri is my name. We appear alongside Mr. George Ochieng.
We had interested Kenya Export Floriculture, Horticulture and Allied Workers Union.
My lords and my ladies, my name is David Omulama. I appear in person for the interested party.
Consumer Federation of Kenya. Devki Steel.
May it please you, my lords, my ladies. Kate holding brief for Mr. Makori for Devki Steel Mills and Electrical Mobility Association of Kenya.
Kenya Airline Pilots Association. Dr. Morris Juma Okumu and Dr. Maxwell Miawa. I believe we have read out the quorum. Now we have two decisions to make. The first one was the contempt application against the Director General EPRA in petition number 181 of 2023. Mr. Bargoria, is he here?
My lord, if he pleases, my name is Noura. I have been requested to hold brief for Mr. Isa Mansour for the contempt. I believe they're making their way to court.
So we'll go to the main judgment. This is the consolidated judgment in the petitions we have called out. I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunately, the document is about 160 pages. it's about 160 pages.
My lord, we thought it would be longer than that.
As I said last time, my teachers taught me summary and précis, so we tried our best. So what we are going to do, I don't think we will read through all the arguments. We will just go to the analysis and determination.
Exactly.
And we will read it in 3 parts. Of course, the introduction is that this was basically a challenge of various provisions of the finance bill. The first part will be read by my colleague, Justice Mugambi. So he will read the first part of the analysis and he will tell us what issues we consider, and then we'll proceed from there. So let us start. Yes.
Thank you, Judge. I now go to the analysis and determination. From the pleadings, affidavits, and submissions of the parties, we find the following to be the issues emerging for consideration. Can you hear me? Hello? It's okay now? Well, from the pleadings, affidavits, and submissions of the parties, we find the following to be the issues for consideration. Issue number 1 has 3 sub-issues. Issue number 1 is what procedural requirements pertaining to the legislative process of the finance bill as I understand. Sub-issue number 1 is whether the finance bill is a money bill in terms of Article 114 of the Constitution, whether it contains matters outside the scope of a money bill. B, whether the finance bill required concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate. C, whether the estimates of revenue and expenditure were included in the Appropriation Act in accordance with the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act. Issue number 2 is whether public participation whether the public participation conducted was sufficient. Issue number 3 is whether certain taxes cited in the petition and as enacted by the Finance Act 2023 are unconstitutional. Issue number 4 is whether Section 84 of the Finance Act 2023 introducing housing levy is unconstitutional. Issue number 5 is what relief, if any, should the court grant in the circumstances. And issue number 6 is who should bear the cost of the consolidated petitions. I now go to issue number 1, whether the finance bill is a money bill in terms of Article 114 of the Constitution and whether it contained matters outside the scope of a money bill. The petitioner's contention is that the finance bill contained matters that were outside the scope of a money bill, while the respondent's position was that the matters the respondents complained of were incidental to a money bill. The court is therefore called to consider the meaning and place of a money bill in the legislative process. A money bill is provided for and the definition given under Article 114 of the Constitution. We have provided the citation, but I will not be going through that because that is a constitutional provision that you can look for. The High Court in Evans East Africa Limited and another versus Chairman of Betting Control and Licensing Board and 7 others considered the meaning of a money bill and said as follows. A further test is to examine the purpose of the bill. The teeth and substance of the impugned legislation can be decided by examining the purpose of the bill. The preamble of the Finance Bill 2017 reads an act of Parliament to amend the law relating to various taxes and duties and for matters incidental thereto. Here lies the purpose, namely to amend the law relating to various taxes and duties. From the above provisions, a bill dealing with taxes such as the impugned legislation is a money bill. Further, taxation is a function of the national government. Thus, in my view, the bill was correctly processed by the National Assembly because its speed and substance falls within the functions of the national government. It was not necessary for the Senate to be included in the legislative process. End of quote. The position was affirmed by the Court of Appeal in Evans East Africa Limited and another versus Chairman, Betting Control and Licensing Board. We therefore adopt the pith and substance test, which enjoins the court to examine the purpose and the substance of the Act. The object of the Finance Act, as contained in the preamble, states that it is an act of Parliament to amend the laws relating to various taxes and duties and for matters incidental thereto. It contains 102 sections amending existing laws on taxation and related matters, creating new taxes, charges, and levies as revenue-raising measures. The petitioners have challenged some of these provisions on the ground that do not fall within the purview of a money bill. Whether they fall within the definition of a money bill depends on whether they relate to taxes, or are incidental to the proposed taxation measures in the Finance Act. Black's Law Dictionary, 9th edition, defines the term incidental as subordinate to something or greater as subordinate to something of greater importance, having a minor role. Matters incidental to a money bill must have a rational connection with the matters enumerated in Article 114, sub-Article 3, A, B, and C, and D. For example, the imposition, raising, reduction, variation of taxes may necessitate the amendment of other statutes. Hence, the legislature is permitted to include such matters in the money bill. The question that we need to answer is whether the provisions contained complained of by the petitioners relate to or are incidental to a finance bill. From our consideration, it is not disputed that certain amendments contained in the Finance Act are with respect to laws relating to taxes and duties, hence falling within the purview of the Finance Act. These amendments are to the Tax Procedures Act 2015, the Excess Duty Act 2015, the Income Tax, the Value Added Tax, Tax Appeals Tribunals Act, the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, Kenya Revenue Authority Act, and Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act 2015, and Part 7, which is now amended through Section 68 to 74 of the Finance Act. The petitioners contest that Section 76, 77, 78, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90 to 102 of the Finance Act, which amend various legislation on the ground that they water down the character of the Finance Act as a money bill. An individual consideration of the provisions is necessary to determine whether they fall directly within the purview of a money bill or are incidental thereto. The petitioners impugn the inclusion of Section 84 of the Finance Act, which amends the Employment Act 2007 by adding Sections 31B and 31C. The effect of these sections is to impose a new levy known as housing levy, in brackets levy, and provide method for its collection. A levy being a form of tax, its imposition would constitute a tax measure within the purview of a money bill. The effect of Section 85 and 86 of the Finance Act is to amend Section 2 of the Alcoholic Drinks Control Act 2015 to provide for a minimum input tax cost and prohibit the sale, manufacture, packaging, or distribution of alcoholic drinks at a price below the minimum input cost. The amendment involves imposition of excise duty that falls within the purview of a money bill. Section 76 to 78 of the Finance Act amends Section 7 of the Kenya Loans Board Act 1999 by providing for the membership of Kenya Loans Board at Section 76. Section 77 amends Section 35 of the Kenya Loans Board by inserting a new subsection to the effect that annual estimates shall be submitted together with the collated annual loans program as provided for in Section 19. Section 76 and 78 mainly deal with composition of Kenya Loans Board, which has no demonstrable connection to the Finance Act. However, Section 77 of the Act provides for estimates of collated annual loans program. This provision falls within the purview of a Finance Act. Section 87 of the Finance Act 2023 amends Section 28 of the Unclaimed Financial Asset Act 2011 by providing that a beneficiary may designate a proxy to whom the authority may make payments in respect of any claim or asset. The effect being to permit payment to persons other than direct beneficiary of the asset. This matter is neither incidental nor directly connected to a money bill. Section 88 and 89 repeal Section 21 of the Statutory Instruments Act, the consequence being that, unlike before, statutory instruments shall not expire automatically after 10 years of commencement. The result of this amendment is that all statutory instruments that were due to expire on their 10th anniversary are saved. The rationale behind the expiry period is the necessity for reviewing the statutory instruments through public engagement to bring them to the conformity with the changing circumstances. Section 21 is an omnibus provision that affects multiple pieces of legislation. The respondent statement count is over 1,000, and that may or may not have any connection with the Finance Act. The respondent answer to this question was essentially that the host of subsidiary legislation was included in the Finance Act to save them from imminent expiry. In the absence of specificity on the subsidiary registration affected, it is difficult to determine whether this amendment properly belongs to the Finance Act. In addition, Some of the affected instruments may well have an impact upon the powers and functions of county governments and therefore require the input of the Senate. The connection between the said instruments and the Finance Act appears tenuous at best. The Finance Act 2023 at sections 90, 91, 93, 94, 95, 96, 98, and 99 amends the Retirement Benefits Act, the President and designated state officers Act 2015 to provide for monthly and lump sum payments for designated persons under the Act and to include additional beneficiaries. Matters relating to the pension due to a deputy president and the designated state officer relating as they do to changes to a public fund affect the national government and affect the national budget and hence are within the purview of the Finance Act. Section 100 and 102 of the Finance Act 2023 amend the Special Economic Zones Act 2015, while Section 102 of the Finance Act 2023 amends the Export Processing Zones Act 1990. Sections 100 and 101 of the Finance Act provide that a special economic zone is a designated geographical area which may include both customs controlled and non-customs controlled areas where business enabling policies, integrated land uses and sector appropriate on-site and offset infrastructure and utilities shall be provided, or which has the potential to be developed whether on public or private partnership basis, where development zone infrastructure and goods introduced in the customs controlled area exempted from custom duties in accordance with the custom laws. Section 102 of the Finance Act amends the Export Processing Zones Act 1990 to provide for the goods whose content originates from the customs territory shall be exempt from payment of import duties, and goods whose content partially originates from the customs territory shall pay import duties on non-originating components subject to custom procedures. These amendments primarily deal with tax measures, are therefore within the realm of a Finance Act. In view of the foregoing, we are satisfied that applying the pith and substance test that the Finance Bill 2023 is a money bill within the meaning of Article 114 of the Constitution. However, it contains matters other than those listed in the definition of a money bill in Article 114, Sub-Article 3. To the extent that those matters are extraneous to a money bill, they are unconstitutional. Now I go to sub-issue number B, whether estimates of revenue and estimates of expenditure were included in the Appropriation Act in accordance with the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act. The petitioners in petition number E181 of 2023 contended that Appropriation Bill 2023 that was tabled before the National Assembly did not contain estimates of revenue, hence the budget was incomplete and the Resultant Finance Act 2023 is unconstitutional. The budget making process is governed by Article 220 and 21 and 221 of the Constitution, as well as Public Finance Management Act. Under Article 221, Sub-Article 1 and 221 of the Constitution, the Cabinet Secretary responsible for finance is required at least 2 months before the end of the financial year to submit to the National Assembly the estimates of revenue and estimates of expenditure of the national government for the next financial year for tabling before the National Assembly. These estimates, together with the estimates of the Judiciary and the National Assembly, are considered by the appropriate committee of the National Assembly, which makes recommendations to the National Assembly. Under Article 221, Sub-Article 6, when the estimates of the national government and estimates of the expenditure for the Judiciary and the Parliament have been approved by the National Assembly, they are then included in the appropriation bill for introduction in the National Assembly to authorize withdrawal and appropriation of money needed for the expenditure. Having considered the above provisions, our view is that the estimates of revenue and estimates of expenditure are part of the budget making process. Although the bill containing estimates of revenue was not tendered before the court, we ascertained that as part of the budget making process, the estimates of revenue were included in the approved estimates contained in the Appropriation Bill and the Appropriation Act 2023 as published in the Kenya Gazette Supplement numbers 87 of 15th June 2023 and 98 of the 26th of June 2023 respectively. The upshot of the foregoing is that the asserted procedural flaw allegedly arising from want of compliance with the requirement regarding estimates of revenue in the budget process is without foundation and is rejected. Sub-issue number C is whether the finance bill required concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate. Many of the petitions were grounded on the alleged failure by the National Assembly to seek the concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate on the finance bill. They argued that the bill concerned counties because it contained provisions affecting functions and powers of county governments as envisioned in Article 110, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution, making it imperative for the Senate to participate in the legislative process. The petitioner stressed that Section 84 of the Finance Act that imposed the housing levy violated the powers and functions relating to housing, which belong to the county government under Part 2 of the 4th Schedule of the Constitution. The respondent's answer was that the finance bill was firstly a money bill and secondly not a money bill concerning county governments as contemplated in Article 110 of the Constitution. Hence, the concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate was not required and the participation of the Senate was precluded by Article 114 of the Constitution. We have already found that the Finance Bill 2023 was a money bill within the meaning of Article 114 of the Constitution. Thus, pursuant to Article 109, Sub-Article 5, it could only be introduced and considered in the National Assembly in accordance with Article 114 because it dealt with amendment of laws relating to and imposition of taxes under Article 209 of the Constitution, which is a function of the national government. The role of the Senate is expressly circumscribed by Article 96, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution, which limits its lawmaking function to considering, debating, and approving bills concerning counties as provided in Articles 109 to 113, thereby expressly excluding money bills envisaged in Article 114. Accordingly, and from a plain reading of Article 96, Sub-Article 2 and Article 114 of the Constitution, the concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate was not required in respect of a money bill. In this case, the issue of concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate arose when he addressed the Speaker of the National Assembly of the letter dated 15th of June 2023, reference number, that he ascertained that the Senate had a role in the legislative process pertaining to finance bill, where is stated as follows. We have provided that letter, the citation, so I'm not going to go through it. It is in the judgment. Subsequently, the Speaker of the Senate resiled from that position that he had earlier taken and affirmed that the matter did not require concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate by his letter dated 26th of June 2023, which we have also provided the quotation or the letter is set out. No explanation was tendered as to the cause of the alleged error or on such an important question. Now considering the second letter, no explanation was tendered as to the cause of the alleged error on such an important question, resulting in two evidently contradictory letters issuing from the office of the Speaker of the Senate. Nonetheless, it appears that two speakers of the Parliament eventually resolved that the Finance Bill 2023 was a money bill. This determination is not binding on this court, which has jurisdiction to interrogate the legality of the position taken by the speakers. A money bill is distinct, being neither special or ordinary bill concerning counties. Thus, it is not subject to the procedure in Articles 110 to 120 of the Constitution, requiring concurrence of two speakers as a condition precedent and or involvement of the Senate, as was held in Fairbank's East African case. That said, in this instance, the position taken by the Speaker of the Senate in his letter dated 15th of June 2023 is not idle, as the Supreme Court, in the matter of the Speaker of the Senate and another, were discussing the role of the speakers of the respective House of the Parliament, observed as follows. I think it's necessary that I read part of this. This is what the Supreme Court said. Is it in doubt, that is quote, is it in doubt, in view of the formal provisions of the law, when and how the question for the consideration of the two speakers arises under Article 110 of the Constitution? We do not think so. Mr. Norgate submitted the requirement for a joint resolution of the question whether a money bill is one concerning counties is a mandatory one, and the legislative path is well laid out. It starts with the determination of the question by either speaker, depending on the origin of the bill. Such a determination is communicated to the other speaker with a view to obtaining concurrence. Failing a concurrence, the two speakers are to jointly resolve the question. Both sets of standing orders are crystal clear on this scenario, and both on this point, as we find, faithfully reflect the terms of the Constitution itself. It is clear, though some of the council appearing before us appear to overlook this, that the business of considering the passing of any bill is not to be embarked upon and concluded before the two chambers, acting through their speakers, address and find an answer for a certain particular question. What is the nature of the bill in question? The two speakers, in answering that question, must settle three sub-questions before a bill that has been published goes through the motions of debate, passage, and final assent by the President. The sub-questions are, is this a bill concerning county government? And if it is it a special or an ordinary bill? Is this a bill not concerning county government? That is number B. And C, is this a money bill? How do the two speakers proceed in answering those questions or sub-questions? They must consider the content of the bill. They must reflect upon the objectives of the bill. This is by the Constitution. This is by the Constitution. It's not a unilateral exercise. And on this principle, it is obvious that the Speaker of the National Assembly, by abandoning all the engagement or consultation with the Speaker of the Senate, and proceeding as he did in the matter before the court, and acting contrary to the Constitution and its fundamental principles regarding harmonious motion of state institutions. Neither speaker may, to the exclusion of the other, determine the nature of a bill, for that would inevitably result in usurpations of jurisdiction to the prejudice of the Constitutional principle of harmonious interplay of state institutions. It is evident that the Senate, though entrusted with less expansive legislative role than the National Assembly, stands as a constitutional safeguard for the principle of devolved government. This purpose would be negated if the Senate were not to participate in the enactment of legislation pertaining to the devolved units of the counties. Our understanding of the foregoing pronouncement of the Supreme Court is that prior to either house taking up any bill, it is desirable, and we deliberately use the word desirable, it is desirable for the speakers to determine the nature of the bill and the path it should take. From the perspective of the Supreme Court, the two speakers ought to have concurred as to the nature of the bill prior to the introduction in the National Assembly. In any event, as already stated, the concurrence of the two speakers of Parliament cannot oust the jurisdiction of the court under Article 165 of the Constitution to interrogate such concurrence. We have a case here, the case of the Institute of Social Accountability, and another was the National Assembly, which stresses that fact. Having held that the Finance Act is a money bill, we are not persuaded that the failure by the Speaker of the National Assembly to seek concurrence from the Speaker of the Senate prior to the introduction of the Finance Bill vitiates the Resource Act. Concurrence of the two speakers is not a requirement under Article 114 of the Constitution.
Over to Justice Meoli for the next part.
Thank you, Judge. I will deal with two issues. That is issue number 2 and 3. Issue number 2 being whether the public participation conducted was sufficient. Issue number 3 being whether certain taxes cited in the petition and as enacted by the Finance Act are unconstitutional. Starting with the issue number 2, whether the public participation conducted was sufficient. The petitioners assailed the Finance Act on the ground that there was inadequate public participation. We appreciate that public participation is the hallmark of constitutional democracy and a manifestation of the people's sovereignty. Article 10, Sub-Article 2A of the Constitution affirms public participation as part of the national values and principles of governance that must guide all persons, state organs, state officers, and public officers when making or implementing public policy decisions. Moreover, Article 118 provides for the participation by the people in the legislative process, and we cited that provision. The principle of public participation in the lawmaking process has been considered in many judicial decisions. The Supreme Court, in the matter of the National Land Commission, acknowledged the principle of public participation as a form of checks and balances on the various arms of government in the execution of their mandates. In British American Tobacco PLC, the Court of Appeal set out the principles of public participation. I will just cite a few of them. The first being, it applies to all aspects of governance, and the public, number 2, the public officer and or entity charged with the performance of a particular duty bears the honors of ensuring and facilitating public participation. Number 3, the lack of a prescribed legal framework for public participation is no excuse for not conducting public participation. Number 4, public participation must be real and not illusory. Number 5, public participation is not an abstract notion. It must be purposive and meaningful. Number 6, public participation must be accompanied by reasonable notice and reasonable opportunity. Number 7, public participation is not necessarily a process consisting of oral hearings. Written submissions can also be made. And the court went further to outline the components of meaningful public participation, which you have cited there. Whether the public participation exercise was sufficient to meet the test in the BAT case is a question of fact. There is ample evidence that the National Assembly invited citizens to submit and give comments on the bill by way of letters to various stakeholders and newspaper advertisements. Secondly, the invitations indicated the venues of the public meetings and the manner of submission of written memoranda on the bill. The National Assembly provided liaison officers for the meetings. We find that the manner in which the National Assembly proposed to conduct the public participation was not only facilitative but also reasonable in the circumstances. Further, we do find that the public participation exercise was real and not illusory or cosmetic, because in response to the invitations, various members of the public and stakeholders gave their views and comments, which were received by the committee. From the matrix of stakeholder comments and memoranda exhibited by the respondents, the views of the stakeholders and members of the public were considered, as some proposals were adopted while others were rejected. The public participation exercise was thus real and gave diverse stakeholders an opportunity to present their views on the bill. The petitioners complained that some of the submissions by the members of public were rejected without giving reasons. The enactment of the Finance Act is a legislative process, and in discharge of its legislative mandate, the National Assembly passed it. There is no express obligation on the part of Parliament to give written reasons for adopting or rejecting any proposals received from members of the public. Nevertheless, we think that in order to enhance accountability and transparency, it is desirable that the relevant committee, after conducting public participation, gives reasons for rejecting or adopting proposals received. Apart from the sufficiency of public participation, the petitioners complained that the National Assembly incorporated into the bill 18 additional amendments whose proposals were not subject to public participation. The proposed amendments were to the Income Tax Act, the Value Added Tax Act, the Excise Duty Act, and Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act, the Kenya Revenue Authority Act, the Retirement Benefits Act, the Alcoholic Drinks Control Act of 2010, the Special Economic Zones Act, and the Export Processing Zones Act. The National Assembly Standing Orders 132 and 133 permit amendments to be made to a bill during the committee stage. And we have cited again the case of Pevans, East Africa, the decision of the Court of Appeal in that matter, where the court affirmed the position that Parliament has the power during the legislative process to make changes to a bill post-public participation. And I think it's important that I read this passage. It must be appreciated that after the National Assembly has heard the views of members of public and industry stakeholders on a bill, it is not precluded from effecting amendments to the bill before finally passing it. These amendments do not necessarily have to agree with the views expressed by the people who have been heard, so long as the views have been taken into account. In our view, it would bring the legislative process to a complete halt and undermine Parliament's ability to discharge its constitutional mandate if, after having facilitated public participation on a bill, Parliament is required to adjourn its proceedings every time a member proposes an amendment to the bill so that further public participation can take place on the particular proposed amendment. End of quote. By its nature, public participation is intended to explore new issues that may be raised, interrogate, and understand existing ones, which may lead to revision or refinement of the bill through new proposals and amendments. We are bound by the holding in Pevan's case, as, which I have read from, that once the National Assembly has heard the views of the general public and the stakeholders on the bill, it is not precluded from effecting amendments to the bill during debate before it is passed, as a contrary position would amount to curtailing the legislative mandate of the National Assembly. The National Assembly was not required, therefore, to submit the amendments complained of to public participation on narrow issues that were within what was contemplated within the objects and memorandum of the bill. Having considered the relevant facts and the record, and bearing in mind that the finance bill is a time-bound legislation, we are satisfied that the public participation process conducted by the National Assembly was sufficient. I will now move to the third issue, which is whether certain taxes cited in the, whether certain taxes cited in the petition as enacted by the Finance Act are unconstitutional. The petitioners challenge tax-raising measures introduced by the Finance Act. We will resolve them in light of the applicable constitutional provisions. Under Article 94, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution, the legislative authority of the Republic is derived from the people and vested in Parliament. Correspondingly, Article 210, Sub-Article 1, provides that no tax or licensing fee may be imposed, waived, or varied except as provided by legislation. The power to impose taxes by the national government is provided for in Article 209 of the Constitution, and we have cited the entire provision. And the totality of the aforesaid provisions is that the legislature, in this case the National Assembly, has broad powers to levy tax, so long as the power is not exercised in a manner that infringes or violates provisions of the Constitution, more particularly the process prescribed under the Bill of Rights. Tax laws are not enacted in a vacuum. They are the product of a process which is recognized by the Constitution. Upon formulation of policies underpinning the revenue and expenditure by government, the legal process commences with the National Treasury preparing a budget policy statement and submitting it to the Cabinet for approval pursuant to the Public Finance Management Act. This culminates in presentation of the estimates of revenue and estimates of expenditure and the budget to the National Assembly for consideration and enactment of the Appropriations Act under Article 220 and 221 of the Constitution. Revenue-raising measures are provided for in the Finance Act, which is a money bill recognized by Article 114 of the Constitution. In view of the merger of policy and legislation, as reflected in many judicial discretions, courts have been slow to interfere with tax legislation. We cite here the case of in the state of MP versus Rakesh Kohli and another. It's a decision of the Supreme Court of India. It's a brief one, I'll just read for us. While dealing with the constitutional validity of a taxation law enacted by Parliament or state legislature, the court must have regard to the following principles. 1, there is always a presumption in favor of constitutionality of a law made by Parliament or a state legislature. 2, no enactment can be struck down by just saying that it is arbitrary or unreasonable or irrational, but some constitutional infirmity has to be found. 3, the court is not concerned with the wisdom or lack of it, the justice or injustice of the law, as the Parliament and state legislatures are supposed to be alive to the needs of the people whom they represent, and they are the best judge of the community by whose suffrage they came into existence. 4, hardship is not relevant in pronouncing on the constitutional validity of a fiscal statute or economic law. And 5, in the field of taxation, the legislature enjoys greater latitude for classification. The respondents argued that the court should not intervene in tax issues because these are policy matters. This approach is correct to a certain extent, as exemplified by Odunga J, Inooro and 3 others, versus the National Assembly. I do not need to read that, but we have cited the passage from his judgment. On the other hand, the court has a constitutional duty under Article 165, Sub-Article 3b, D, and D, Roman 1 and 2, to determine the question whether a right of fundamental freedom in the Bill of Rights excuse me, has been denied, violated, infringed, or threatened, and whether any law is inconsistent with or in contravention of the Constitution, and the question whether anything said to be done excuse me, to be done under the authority of this Constitution or any other law is inconsistent with or in contravention of the Constitution. By these provisions, neither laws nor policies are immune from the scrutiny of the court. And in the Nubian Rights Forum, and two others versus the Attorney General, the court echoed this position by stating that anything done by Parliament outside the confines of the Constitution and the law attracts the attention and action of this court. In conducting an inquiry into the constitutionality of the decisions and actions of the legislature, the court finds constitutional authority in Article 165 3D. The thrust of the respondent's response to the petitioner's case is that the legislature has the power and authority to impose taxes. This power is not unconstrained. It is constrained within the four corners of the Constitution. Parliament cannot exercise its power in an arbitrary fashion without any rational connection to a legitimate purpose. To permit the legislature to assert a contrary position would undermine the national values of and principles of the rule of law, good governance, accountability, and transparency. Turning now to the taxes challenged, the petitioners attacked Section 2 as read with Section 21 of the Finance Act for amending Section 35 of the Income Tax Act as unconstitutional for imposing taxes on entertainment, which is a function of the county government under Part 2.4 of the fourth schedule of the Constitution. Digital monetization is introduced in Section 2 as a tax on payments for entertainment, social, literal, etc., through any medium or channel. Such payment is treated as income, and a person paying a non-resident or a person not having a permanent establishment is required to pay withholding tax on the payment. The purpose of the amendment here is to clarify the type of income to be taxed. It is a tax on income which the national government is authorized to impose pursuant to Article 209(1) Sub-Article A of the Constitution. This does not affect the powers and functions of the county governments as contended by the petitioners. Similarly, digital asset tax introduced by Section 2 is payable by a person on income derived from the transfer or exchange of digital assets, for example, cryptocurrency. This is a tax on income, and the manner in which it is charged and collected is within the purview of Article 209, Sub-Article 1A of the Constitution. The petitioners also challenged the Finance Act on the ground that it includes tax on winnings from betting, gaming, and lotteries, which they contend violates the fourth schedule, part 2 of the fourth schedule of the Constitution, in that betting, casinos, gambling, and gambling fall within the powers and functions of the county government. The Finance Act amends Section 2 of the Income Tax Act to define winnings as a payout from a betting, gaming, lottery, prize competition, gambling, or similar transaction under the Betting, Lotteries, and Gaming Act, excluding the amount staked or wagered in that transaction. This section is to be read with Section 10 of the Income Tax Act, Section 10 of the Income Tax Act, which states that winnings constitute income accrued in or derived from Kenya and are subject to income tax. The purpose of this amendment, to our view, was to clarify the definition of the term winnings. This is plainly income, a matter of income within Article 209, Sub-Article 1A, and does not affect the powers and functions of the county governments, as was held in Pevan's case. The petitioner, in Petition E211 of 2023, challenged the proposal in the Finance Bill seeking to raise the entry point of eligibility of businesses for payment of gross turnover tax from a sum of 1 million shillings to Kenya shillings 500,000. Upon our perusal of the Finance Act, we found that this proposed amendment was not enacted. Section 26 of the Finance Act amended the third schedule of the Income Tax Act to introduce new tax bands. In addition, Section 7 of the Act amended Section 10 of the Income Tax Act relating to withholding tax. The petitioners have not demonstrated how these amendments affect specific provisions of the Constitution. In any event, we hold that these are matters related to tax policy and administration. Section 33 of the Finance Act amended Section 17 of the VAT Act to introduce 16% VAT on insurance compensation. The petitioners argued that insurance compensation is not income and is therefore not subject to taxation, and further that the provision amounts to expropriation of property in violation of Article 40 of the Constitution. We hold that imposition and collection of tax by legislation does not of itself constitute a violation of the right to hold or own property. And here we cite the case of George Lesaloi, Selelo, and another versus the Commissioner General. This amendment, the amendment that is by Section 33, only applies to persons who had claimed input VAT on supplies or services and who subsequently receive compensation, which includes VAT, and are therefore required by the amendment to declare the VAT component. This, too, is a tax administrative measure and does not violate Article 40 of the Constitution. The petitioners equally challenged Part 2, that is Sections 30 to 38 of the Finance Act, which amended Sections 5, 8, 12, 17, 31, 34, 43, the first and second schedule of the VAT Act. These provisions impose, vary, or remove VAT on specific goods and services. They also vary the VAT rates applicable and the manner VAT is administered. We hold that these are matters within the competence of the legislature and reflect the policy choices of the national government. And the petitioners, to our mind, have not shown how these provisions violate the Constitution. Moving on to Part 4 of the Finance Act, which contains Section 40 to 48, which introduced amendments to Section 2, 20, 28, 40, the schedules, and added a further Sections 36(1)(a) and 36(a) to the Excise Duty Act. We say that excise duty is a tax on the sale and importation of specific goods and services. The amendments introduced the requirement for remittance of excise duty on betting and gaming within 24 hours of closure of a transaction, as well as remittance of excise duty on alcoholic beverages within 24 hours of removal of the goods from the stockroom. The petitioner's complaint is that the requirement is unreasonable. We find that this is a tax administration measure designed to ensure that excise duty is collected and accounted for. We do not find any justification to intervene in that matter. Other grounds upon which the respondents assailed the excise duty relate to changes in tariff headings and rates of taxation on various products. The petitioners have not shown how these provisions violate the Constitution. We therefore hold that these changes are governed by policy and do not violate the Constitution. The petitioner in petition E211 of 2023 challenged excise duty imposed on human hair, wigs, false beards, eyebrows, eyelashes, and artificial nails in respect of the finance bill. You can see I'm smiling. However, this provision did not see the light of day and was not enacted into the Finance Act and is therefore a non-issue. Thank you.
I shall now read the second last issue, which is whether the Section 84 of the Finance Act 2023, introducing the housing levy, is unconstitutional. The petitioner's grievances against the introduction of the housing levy are varied and include the following: that gross salaries of employees will be impacted, that salaries of judges, members of constitutional commissions, and holders of independent offices will be affected in contravention of the Constitution, that there was a lack of a legal framework on the imposition and administration of the levy, contrary to Article 210, that the absence of a foundational statute results in uncertainty, that no fund as envisaged in Article 2061 has been put in place, and the Constitution places an obligation on the national government to deposit all monies it raises in taxes in the consolidated fund, that KRA's mandate does not include collection of funds arising from the levy, that the provision violates the Housing Act, and that it further violates that the deduction is unconscionable and impractical, that Part 1 of the 4th schedule to the Constitution limits national government's functions in relation to matters housing, to development of a housing policy, and no more, that public participation in respect of the levy was cosmetic and a mockery of the centrality of the people as a source of authority exercised by the government, that the Employment Act already obligates employers to provide housing for the employees, and that the imposition of the levy amounts to double taxation and is a form of regressive and discriminatory tax that imposes a disproportionate burden on one group of earners without justification, and is therefore a violation of Articles 10, 21.3, 27.3, 201 of the Constitution, that imposition of the tax under the Employment Act, whose right is to secure rights of employees, amounts to a limitation of labor rights, amongst others, and must be justifiable under Article 24 of the Constitution. The respondent's answer to the petitioner's grievances is that the taxation is a prerogative of the national government, that the national government is not seeking to regulate income as a socio-economic activity, but the amendment is aimed at taxation on income, which the national government is empowered to impose, and that establishment of a housing fund is a policy decision aimed at enabling the government to provide adequate housing for all its citizens towards fulfilling the dictates of Article 43(1)(b) of the Constitution. They further argue that the impugned section enjoys presumption of constitutionality, and that the introduction of the levy is not a novel issue, as there are other levies imposed by the national government that are geared towards collecting funds for various key priority areas, such as the sugar development levy, railway development levy, road maintenance levy, national hospital monies paid to the National Hospital Insurance Fund, the National Social Security Fund, hotel and catering levy, fuel levy, standards levy, and others. They submit that the housing levy will assist the government to provide affordable housing and alleviate the housing shortage in this country. Further, the taxation targets certain sectors of the economy, and if sufficiently justified, differentiated treatment is not unconstitutional. The respondents defended the appointment of KRA as an agency of the government for collection of revenue to collect the levy, citing Section 5(1) of the KRA Act and Section 75 of the Public Finance Management Act. It was also asserted that the levy is anchored in the Housing Act and amendments to the Employment Act, and that further amendments had been conceived and were being introduced to create the housing levy fund pursuant to Article 2062. That said, the fund would be distinct from the National Housing Development Fund created by Section 7(3) of the Housing Act, and that these provisions satisfy the prescriptions in Articles 12, 10, 201, 206, and 209 of the regarding legality of tax measures. We now turn to consider the substantial issue raised by the petitioners, whether the amendment of the Employment Act by Section 84 of the Finance Act to create a housing levy or tax was in accordance with the constitutional requirements. The effect of the amendment was to add Sections 31B and 31C to the Employment Act. The amendment is in three parts. The first part imposes a levy on the employer and employee. The second part states that states the purpose of and ring fences it, while the third part imposes on the employer the obligation to deduct, collect, and remit the levy, and provides a sanction for non-compliance, and we have set it out in full. The petitioner argued that the housing levy is not a tax contemplated under Article 209 of the Constitution. The amendment does not contain a legal definition of the housing levy, nor even define the term levy as used in that amendment. This lack of uncertainty is a matter of importance, is a matter as important as the definition of the housing levy, is a major defect in the impugned amendment. One of the distinguishing features of the other existing levy that was cited by the respondents in defending the housing levy is that they are anchored in comprehensive acts of parliament that include definitions of subject levies. Other tax legislation, such as the Income Tax, VAT Act, Excise Duty Act, contain definitions of the taxes imposed therein. The petitioners also pointed out that the definition of employee contained in the amendment does not distinguish between local and foreign employees. Although the Constitution does not use the term levy, a levy is for all intents and purposes a form of tax. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a levy is the imposition of a fine or a tax, the fine or tax imposed, and to impose or assess a tax or fine by a legal authority. Whereas the term tax means a charge, usually monetary, imposed by the government on persons, entities, transactions, or property to yield public revenue. Broadly, this term embraces all government impositions on the person, property, privileges, occupations, and enjoyment of the person, and includes duties, imposts, and excise. The petition argued that the levy is not one of the enumerated taxes in Article 209 A, B, and D of the Constitution. In the absence of a clear definition of a levy within a foundational statutory enactment, it is difficult to confidently associate the levy with the category of taxes envisaged in the foregoing provisions, although on the face of the amendments it is intended to be levied on income of employees. The uncertainty surrounding the housing levy is compounded by the failure to state the nature of the tax, percentage payable by the employer, is it income tax or a contribution paid by the employer for the benefit of an employee. Under Article 209(2), an Act of Parliament may authorize the national government to impose any other tax or duty except those which the county may impose, which include property rates, entertainment taxes, or any other tax it is authorized to impose by an Act of Parliament. Related to this issue is the question whether imposition of the housing levy is a matter concerning county governments. The petitioners argued that housing development and planning is a function